Thank you, Chair. And again, just as a reminder for everyone present, either in the room or joining us online, that in line with legal requirements, this meeting is being held face to face, and that members of the public can join online and still participate in the meeting. Just to highlight to members of the public, that is only the councillors present that are taking the decisions at the meeting. Officers in attendance are here to provide advice to the councillors. Just as a reminder for anybody who's looking for the agenda and papers, people who are joining online, that the agenda and papers are published on the council's website, and they were published on the 4th of February. You will note that the meeting's being live webcast, and we will be making an audio recording of the meeting, and that will also be published on the council's website in due course. There are no planned fire drills, but I should highlight that should the fire alarm go off at any point during this meeting, we will clearly stop the meeting, and I would ask that everybody follows the fire exit signs and congregate in the car park. If any councillors in the room wish to speak on any items as we work through the meeting, if you could do so by, first of all, raising your hand, and the Vice Chair will note your name, and then when it comes to your turn, when you're invited by the Chair, please use the microphone on the desk in front of you, certainly so that both people in the room but also those online can hear what you're saying. And then finally, when addressing the meeting, for the benefit of all, if people could again just state your name and your role before speaking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Just before we start the meeting, there are no Chair's announcements, but I would just like to add something before we start. We have two tributes to members of councils that have passed, and I feel it only good to put it at this meeting rather than wait for another meeting. So I'd like to just go through the two people that I'd like to pay tribute to. The first one is Professor John Sharp, who passed away on the 27th of November last year. He served as a county councillor for South Petherton between 2001 and 2009. He was 85 years old, and he leaves a widow, Linda, who I've spoken to, and she's told me about John's achievements. In his lifetime, he designed items to aid humanity. For instance, the medical syringe driver, which if anyone knows anything about medical instruments, which was a good addition. As a youthful person, 21 years of age apprentice, he was given the job of drawing up the snoop nose on the Concorde into aluminium sheets so that they could mock up for the construction. His brain could solve problems in many spheres, which he accomplished modestly. He also had a lot of associations with other countries, and the Chinese locomotive, which is currently in the Railway Museum, it was provided for John for the services he gave to the Chinese rail minister. The second person is Terry Hall, who passed away on the 4th of January 2025. Terry was first elected to Taunton Deane Borough Council in 1991 and represented the Manor and Wilton ward, as well serving as Mayor of Taunton Deane from 2012 to 2013. He was 83 years old. He leaves a widow, Anne, and a son. During his time as Mayor, he welcomed the Earl of Wessex to Taunton for the reopening of the Museum of Somerset following its refurbishment in 2012. Councillor Hall, ex-Councillor Hall, will be missed by all those that worked with him. A funeral service will be held at Taunton Crematorium on Friday, the 14th of February at 12 noon. Any donations in his name could be made to Blood Cancer UK, care of Crescent Funeral Services. The flags today are being flown at half-mast in their memory, and also will be flown again at half-mast for Terry's funeral. I'd like you just now to stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please be seated. I know Simon Coles would like to speak. Where are you, Simon? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I rise to speak about Terry, who I met when I was a newly elected councillor in 2005. And he was one of the first councillors to talk to me, and he came up to me with some wonderful words of advice. Just follow everything I say and vote with me and everything will be all right. I thought it was great coming from a Conservative politician when I was a newly elected Liberal Democrat. But nothing in his manner changed. He always gave me the benefit of his advice, whether I wanted it or not, and whether I thought it was accurate or not, and tried to persuade me to vote along with him in all things. Most of the time, he was a very, very good, clear, thoughtful, incisive mind, looking to do the best for the people that he represented. And actually, frankly, thank you.
Thank you very much, Simon. I'd give the opportunity if any other councillor wanted to speak. Okay, looking around, no. Okay, if we now move into the published agenda, and I would ask Scott to read out the apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for any mispronunciations. We have apologies from Councillors Surya Ujla, Jason Baker, Adam Boyden, Tom Deakin, Andy Dingwall, Ben Ferguson, Susanna Hart, Marcus Cravis, Stephen Page, Kathy Pearce, Emily Pearlston, Derek Perry, Rob Reed, Tony Robbins, Jill Slocum, and finally Andy Soughton.
Yes. Andy?
Apologies for the delay.
Okay. Dave Mansell.
From Shane Collins and Michael Dunk.
God, so she God, there the sound. I can't mute it.
Is there a
Switch the
microphone
phone off.
on? Yes, I can see Mandy, the one in front of you.
Not that one.
I will. Are there any further apologies? Yes,
Lance Dudridge.
thank you. Okay, I can't see any more hands coming up. So we'll move on to the next agenda item and go across to, sorry,
You got Philip Ham.
yes, we
Thank
did.
you.
Yeah, thanks. If I can go over to Jill now for the declarations of interest.
They've not received any declarations of interest that haven't already been disclosed and declared on the council's register, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. I can't see any hands of anything other than that. So moving on to the next agenda item, which is public question time. Members of the public have 3 minutes to put their points across. Just to note that all members have been given a copy of the questions. So if you want to précis them rather than go through everything, that is at your discussion. There is a clock which is in front of me at the moment to give you the countdown of the 3 minutes. We have 3 speakers, and the first one is Neil Gold.
Hi, I'm Natasha Tremelling, asking a question for the Unison membership. So Unison have repeatedly raised concerns with Somerset Council through the joint consultative forum about the lack of detail within the consultation documentation. We've outlined concerns that there's been no costed business case, outlining how functions of Somerset Council will continue post restructure. Key projects required for the delivery of the proposed restructure, including transformation, IT and AI solutions, have not been developed or costed in a business case for this transformation programme. Our members are concerned that services will suffer as there's no capacity to take on the work of colleagues who are made redundant, and a robust transformation programme has not been implemented. We would like to recognise that the external audit published at the Audit Committee on the 30th of January 2025 raised similar concerns. Unison recognise that the Council must create a comprehensive and sustainable plan for the future. However, Unison has raised repeated concerns about the lack of detailed costed business case and the inadequacy of detail on the projects required to implement these changes. How does the Council intend to address this issue to ensure that vital services are not compromised, and when the new structure is implemented early in the next financial year?
Thank you very much. Theo.
Thank you very much for your question. Joint consultation meetings have been held fortnightly throughout the duration of the Council restructure programme. All requests from recognised trade unions have been responded to verbally at the meetings, and where written questions have been submitted, full written responses have been provided. This question repeats similar question raised recently at the Scrutiny for Corporate and Resources and Audit Committees.
Perpetrated symptoms being prioritised over addressing the underlying causes of these vulnerabilities.
Can we find out where the interference is coming from, please? Okay, it seems to have gone away, so please continue, Theo.
This question repeats similar questions raised recently at the Scrutiny for Corporate and Resources and Audit Committees, and responses have been provided there. Service impact assessments have been undertaken, details of which, along with the proposed mitigating actions, are included in the papers for this meeting. These impacts have been identified by the relevant directors for each service and have been reviewed by both scrutiny and executive. We accept that there will be challenges in implementing the changes required to work with a reduced workforce, and agree that there will be a level of investment required in our systems to support this change. The transition required in working with a reduced workforce is being planned for and worked through with the directors and their teams. There will need to be some changes to services as identified in the report, and we will closely monitor the impacts of these changes and adapt our mitigating actions as required.
Thank you, Thea. Our next speaker is Nigel Behan on the restructure. You have 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not going to repeat everything here because it's very similar to the previous one. And we did raise issues at audit a few weeks ago based on a similar theme. But the issue today, obviously I'm Nigel Behan from Unite the Union, and the issue today, you've got item 4 and item 6, which is the workforce restructure programme and the auditor's report before you today. So rather than, I mean, you've read all this obviously, but I'll read the last question out. Does the council believe that significant attention has been given to the external auditor's critical comments and that changes to service delivery should have been planned prior to the rushed job call? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Back to Thea.
Yes, we have given serious consideration to the external auditor's report and have provided a management response in the papers for this meeting. In 2024-25, we accelerated the Somerset Council Improvement and Transformation Programme to deliver 34 million of workforce savings, compared to the target of 12 million as outlined in the original LGR business case. This reduction in general fund has been made in advance of the 2025-26 financial year to help close the budget gap, which was originally forecast in excess of £100 million. The pressure on our council budget remains severe, with demand for social care services far in excess of income levels. So in addition to action taken in line with the medium-term financial strategy, the council has requested exceptional financial support from government for 24-25 and 25-26. This is a national problem affecting all local authorities and not a reflection of our transformation plans. Without taking this decisive action in 24-25, the Section 151 officer may have had to issue a Section 114 notice, and more draconian measures, including stopping services, would be a consequence.
Thank you. Okay, our last speaker is David Orr on the reorganisation. You have 3 minutes. Thank
Okay,
you.
before we start the clock, do you want me to introduce myself or?
You can do, but obviously the 3 minutes will start ticking, but please do.
Okay. A reminder that you were elected in 2022 and have had 1 year to plan and nearly 2 years to implement the rationalisation savings from 5 councillors into 1. For those councillors who think this is day 1, then a reminder it is day 683. The financial emergency was declared 18 months in from you being elected in 2022. The key business as usual rationalisation savings on day 683 have attracted trenchant criticism in 2 red cards from the government appointed auditor for activities that need to be in place in just 7 weeks' time when the 25-26 year begins. One states, the council should develop the overarching transformation business case and detailed business cases for individual work streams that will deliver service transformation and contribute to delivering the council's ambitious savings targets. The funding required to deliver transformation and the new target operating model should be identified and a funding plan developed. This should be undertaken at pace and will deliver the savings required to balance the 25-26 budget. This council's response to this unusual statutory recommendation from the government-appointed auditor is a veritable word salad with no explanation as to how, on day 696, key plans and an operating model appear to be absent or incomplete. Actual implementation and delivery are lagging well behind any commercial timetable, with a plethora of aspirational management speak reports. The government-appointed auditors Grant Thornton last week raised yet another red flag. The council is delivering the workforce reduction programme before the development of the detailed transformation programme business case and before key enabler projects relating to ICT, data and process improvements have been implemented. The implementation of the staff reduction programme before the transformation programme has been developed presents a risk that reductions in staff will impact on the council's capacity to deliver services. Without a full staffing plan identifying the skills requirements based on a detailed service plan, it is difficult to see how the new organisation could be efficient and cost effective. Councillors know all about failed transformation programmes. They have been a source of chaos and concern at Somerset County Council with South West 1, and then at both Taunton Deane and South Somerset District Council with Ignite. Will we in the coming year see yet another failed transformation programme at this new unitary council? Sadly, and now unavoidable, I think we will. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thea.
Thank you for your question. In 2024-25, we revised the Somerset Council Improvement and Transformation Programme to deliver the £34 million of workforce savings compared to the target of 12 million as outlined in the original LGR business case. We disagree about your statement of failed future transformation programme. The pressure on our council budgets are severe, with demand for social care services in excess of income levels. And so in addition to action taken in line with the MTFP, the council needs to request exceptional financial support from government for 24-25 and 25-26. As I've alluded to earlier, this is a national problem affecting all local authorities and not a reflection of our transformation plans. Service impact assessments have been conducted and the proposed mitigating actions are included in the meeting papers. These impacts, identified by Service Directorate and reviewed by the Scrutiny and Executive, acknowledge the challenges of working with a reduced workforce. Investment in systems will be required to support this change. The transition is being planned with directors and their teams, and service changes will be monitored and adapted as needed. It is clear that the activity of the last year in readiness for the forthcoming financial year has been about improvement and change and LGR, and less about organisational-wide transformation of how we will need to deliver services in future. A transformation and improvement business plan will be developed for future years based on data, evidence, and a robust business case to demonstrate a return on investment. We have given serious consideration to the external auditor's report and have provided a management response.
Thank you, Thea. Can I thank the members that have come along to put the questions? And like I say, the debate will continue. I know, Will Wren, you wish to put forward a point of order on the agenda.
Can you hear me all right? Yes, I noticed that we're debating the organisational structure at item 4 and the interim auditor's report for 23-24 at item 6. If you read the auditor's report, it contains...
Microphone's gone.
Apologies for that. If you look at the auditor's report, it contains 2 statutory recommendations, which I'm told are extremely rare. The second one relates to transformation directly, and it is my view we should be debating this auditor's report before we move into the transformation. So I would like to know why the order has been selected or whether the agenda can be changed. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask the perhaps Scott to address that, or Alan.
Chair, if I may, the papers associated with the auditor's report set out the position for the previous financial year and established the measures that the auditor believes need to be taken into account as a result of a review of our financial findings and also the overall approach for the authority. However, the budget that was set previously sets out the fact that we had to deliver, at the council's request, had to deliver additional £34 million worth of savings. So the order reflects the fact that this is delivery of a decision that has already been taken by council and reflects the steps that are being taken. So in my view, having reviewed this, it would be appropriate to consider them in the order that's set out within the papers.
Okay, I'd like to take your advice, and so with that, I think we continue with the agenda as written. So move on to item 4, which is council organisation structure, and pass over to Duncan. I'd like to obviously highlight that the Appendix D was published on the 10th of February 2025, so was updated.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, good. So thank you for asking me to introduce this and speak to the paper. Just for clarity, this is not a normal process for council in terms of governance decisions. As the monitoring officers just outlined, council set a budget in February of last year, which actually asked officers to try and find £40 million worth of workforce related savings as part of a proposal to enable us to balance the budget in February of this year. As the head of paid service, it's my responsibility to come to you and say, how are we deploying the officer resource we have in line with the budgets that council has made available to us? So this is what that report does and what the process we've been going through does. It reflects back the fact that over the course of the last 12 months or slightly longer, we have actually taken some decisions through executive as a council, which has set out a vision for a future council, which is about being smaller, lean, efficient. We're still picking up on the requirements of the local government reorganisation business case of making sure we got one coherent structure across the whole organisation. And obviously, as you know, we're in a financial emergency and we need to find savings to be able to balance the books. So this decision for council today is to endorse the restructure paper. It actually falls to me to make the decision about how we're deploying the staff against the budget you've made available. But obviously we have consulted very, very widely in terms of with members, with groups, with scrutiny committees, with unions, with colleagues and with partners before we even got to the stage of putting the paper to you today for your view. So I am genuinely interested in hearing the debate today as well, Chair. What I would just say in terms of going through the paper and picking up a few of the themes that have already been aired by some of the public questions, this work is essential for the council. Just put the money to one side for a second. We vested from 5 different councils. We started out going through some rationalisation work to bring us into one structure within the council. But within the first 6 months, or actually earlier than that, it was patently obvious the council was in a financial emergency and that the work we had already inherited from the LGR business case was in no way sufficient to actually help us balance the books. So we took a decision very publicly, everyone's aware of this, that we would halt that process and go into a bigger comprehensive restructuring process, which is what we've done and what you see the results of today. So this is essential. We still have colleagues within the council today who are effectively working within old structures because we hadn't rearranged their working arrangements
after vesting day. What this structure gives us is a complete consolidated workforce structure for the whole council. It gives absolute clarity about which teams are doing which job. It makes it quite clear what the relationship is between teams. It makes it quite clear what the relationship is and who's responsible in terms of management functions for each of those areas. So even if this didn't save any money, it was absolutely essential. We went through the whole organisation and gave that clarity to our workforce and our partners and to you about how we actually were deploying the staff within the organisation to deliver the services we've got responsibility for. But this report does respond to the financial emergency. The target that was implicit from the budget was for £40 million worth of savings. We were able to find effectively £36 million worth of savings, but during the consultation process, we did agree as management to put £2 million of that back into the structure to try and smooth things, make things better, pick up improvements or make suggestions that people have made in the consultation that would make things more efficient for us. So it does deliver against the workforce savings that we needed to do, which is a significant plank for being able to set a budget in the next few weeks. The third thing I would just say is this is also clearly linked to our future transformation. If we'd said we wanted to transform the council, and I think one of the speakers has previously used the comments of, with magic IT systems that miraculously made the savings we needed to balance the books. I would have said to you as a head of paid service that the council at the time we set off into the financial emergency was not in a position to be able to do that. We did not have the capacity at that time, 6 months into a new organisation that was trying to bring 5 organisations together, to actually go ahead and specify a clever, technically competent transformation programme that could deliver 34 or 40 million pounds worth of savings within 12 months. And had we set off to do that, we would have failed, and we would then been issuing a section 114. We'd have also given no clarity to our workforce about their roles and how they need to be working together. And we still have people, as say, who haven't had that clarity since vesting day. So this is absolutely essential for the future transformation programme. And I think the auditor's report, which I know we'll debate in a moment, Chair, but has just been flagged, rightly relates to this item, doesn't get that context. That report was written about our 23-24 position. And what it very clearly talks about is actually where we are now. Where we are now, I mean, we put this paper through and so we get a bit of feedback, paper through and it's endorsed and approved tomorrow. Then what will happen is we have a structure which we can now say, so how do we transform from the structure? Until this paper, we did not have that clarity. So any of our transformation plan would have been built on shipping sands because we didn't have the structure that meant we could actually move forward properly and put in clever, appropriate transformation. So what you have in this paper is very much a set of efficiencies. Try that again, is that better? It's a set of duplication that we're dealing with, which we inherited from vesting day and bringing the organisations together. It is a set of improvements. There are a number of points in this paper where we've actually brought more resource in to do jobs that you've been saying, we've been saying haven't been delivered because we didn't inherit people doing those things from predecessor councils. So there are new posts in here and new functions in here that we're supporting, as well as in the budget proposals. And what it does mean is that when we move forward with the transformation plan, which we're already developing, and we'll be asking you as councillors to look at early in the new financial year, that you will be able to see that is now evidence-based, because when we talk about savings, we'll be able to articulate exactly any joy? Yeah, it can't be a case that the savings have to be assumed. We have to be able to prove to you in a business case that transformation savings can be delivered. So just very briefly on the paper, Chair, if I could, in terms of the policy and the process we've gone through. This one. See if any more microphones don't work when I speak into them. Maybe we should invest in more microphones. That might be the answer. Can't fix the microphones, I'm afraid, Councillor Chilcott, but is that any better? Well, this is the one we started out with, so let's hope it keeps going. In terms of the process then, what we've laid out in the report, excuse me, paragraph 4 in page 1314 lists the decisions and the elements that were already agreed by executive in terms of planning the new structure and the process. And it gives you effectively the building blocks, including the target operating model, including the values and behaviours, including lots of the work we already have in place to support that. And overall, what the paper effectively lays out is the story of what we have done since we started, particularly the financial emergency, which was a senior leadership restructuring, which concluded in summer of 2024, the voluntary redundancy programme, which we concluded in late 2024, and the process that we're looking at the report of today, which is workforce restructuring, which we launched in October of 24 and concludes obviously with this paper and decision. As part of this workforce restructuring piece, we have been in detailed consultation with trades unions, with our colleagues, with partners, with councillors, with scrutiny committees. We've received over 2,000 pieces of feedback, and we have changed the proposals that came out in October quite substantially in line with that feedback and made investments back into the organisation to hopefully try and make those changes more acceptable or reduce the impacts of those changes. And I would just say, we've had a lot of staff who've been affected and concerned by the process. We've had a lot of staff working on this process, very long hours to try and hit the timetables to keep it going for everyone else. We've had great support from trades unions, really good feedback and engagement and comments, and hopefully I appreciate we haven't managed to respond to everything people have said the way people would like us to, but we have made between us, I think, real improvements to the proposals. So I'd just like to thank everyone who's been involved in the process. What the process gives us then is effectively a proposal which we believe as officers, and we believe having consulted with lots of partners and going through a number of processes have outlined, £34 million worth of workforce savings with minimal impacts on the organisation. It would be disingenuous to say there are no impacts of losing 550 full-time posts on the organisation. But what we will have is a stable workforce, a settled workforce, and everyone very clear about their role, their reporting arrangements, and the interaction between all of those posts. We will, unfortunately, I'm sure, be losing a number of colleagues, but I would just point out we do have 630 vacancies, which we are working very hard in the next few weeks to make sure as many people as want to stay working for the council can. We've very much set up this process to minimise the number of compulsory redundancies that we have to undertake. And that's a legal requirement on us, but also a moral requirement on us. We don't want to be losing good quality colleagues. We want to make sure we can keep people in the organisation. So whilst we are losing 550 full-time equivalents, and no doubt we will lose some people because of that, there are a number of vacant roles that I've outlined, which people can apply for, and we're helping people to apply for. One of the key things I think I'd like to flag as a real positive through this process, very much when we started this process, these were proposals driven by senior management trying to work out how we got somewhere near the business case target savings. What's clearly happened over the consultation period and slightly beyond is that local managers and middle managers have taken real ownership with their teams of these proposals. So what you can see in the final proposal, particularly the mitigation that you can see in the appendices, is very much proposals from teams about how they can deliver their jobs within the new structure and the new staffing base that they have available. And we've highlighted where teams have fed back to us that there will be service impacts, all of those, and you have them available in the appendices. And we've put service impact assessments into Appendix C for the 3 areas that we're saying we haven't been able to mitigate the savings to the stage where you might not notice the impact on the services itself. So we do have a huge amount of information for you, and very happy between all of us if you've got any questions on that. But what we have tried to do very hard with teams, and it's the local management and the local teams who've taken the ownership to improve the proposals, is try to mitigate the impacts that there could have been on the service, which leaves us effectively the 3 areas that you can see in Appendix C that we're flagging which is rights of way, waste services and SEND services that might still have residual impacts after the mitigations we put in place. There are a number of other comments which we could pick up, but I'll end in a second, Chair. I would just make sure Council has considered comments from the Scrutiny Committee. We have provided a link in the report, but I think that's important that we consider what Scrutiny say, because it was a very good session and lots of feedback from the Scrutiny Committee. And I would just like to flag, I mentioned that there are a number of areas where we've made investments, Chair. Some of those investments will need to be concluded through the budget setting process, because there are budgets that need to be set through pressure bids. But we are proposing to put additional resource into the planning service, which will mean that the planning service has more staff after the budget set, assuming the budget goes through as written, Chair, than it currently has funded posts now. I'm very happy to talk about those numbers. We're also proposing an investment in the anti-social behaviour service, which is not something we currently offer. We didn't inherit that structure from predecessor councils, but it is a requirement that we have some resources as a council. And in result of the auditor's comments and the peer challenge comments, we are proposing to create a post of Chief Finance Officer, which you'll also see is reflected in the structure, which is different to the original proposals. I'm happy to stop at that, Chair. I'm very happy to take questions on the paper, either the detail or the overall. But thank you for the time to let me introduce the paper.
Thank you, Duncan. Just before we open it up, I'd like to go to Theo Butt-Phillips, who is proposing the recommendations, and then to the leader who's seconding.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know if you're going to allow me to come back later on if I say too much now. I'll try not to say too much now. Firstly, to thank the Chief Executive for his introduction to the report, and to reiterate that it is absolutely essential that we deliver a stable and sustainable council. It's absolutely essential that we get to the point where we have a stable structure, so that we, as councillors and our staff, are able to make sure that Somerset Council delivers for the people of Somerset. We cannot do that if we continue with a system where we have not delivered an agreed long-term staffing structure. And that is what this paper delivers. And it does it in the context of the financial emergency, understanding that we have to make significant savings. So that is why it is absolutely essential that we deliver this, deliver upon this proposal. I formally make the proposal and hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I will allow you back. Bill.
Thank you. Just to echo Councillor Butt-Phillips, thanks to the Chief Executive for his report, and to thank everybody who's contributed through the whole process of reaching this stage, and in particular to thank the unions and our staff and the unions as their representatives for their engagement throughout, and I reserve my right to speak further in the debate.
Thank you. Now I'll open it up. The names I have so far: Tony Locke.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. As planning was mentioned a few times, I'm glad I got my hand up quite quickly with this particular item. As most members would know, last week we had a meeting, last Thursday, a meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee. One item on that agenda was the quarterly report of the planning process throughout the authority. And we've had various reports over the last 12 months, and they've been very worrying to say the least. The committee resolved to note that report, but the main debate focused on the councillors' concern, and I say councillors because it's a cross-party group, concern with the lack of capacity, which I'd be interested to know a bit more on now, with, as mentioned by the Duncan, that the within the planning department. The committee had an in-depth discussion and was unanimous in their views that it is just not the planning department, it is the backup to the planning department and planning officers being able to deliver the service. You have the environmental officers, flooding officers, highways. If you're having cutbacks in all of these areas, they could have a detrimental impact on the delivery of the planning service, which, and I understand, and most of us do, that the restructure is aimed to save money to make this authority more efficient moving forward. But we have to be careful that moving forward, that we don't also increase our expenditure, which is what a lot of the particular ways this report could generate, i.e. determination of planning applications going to appeal. We could lose out drastically there. I've said many times, if an application goes through for appeal, you invariably lose infrastructure funding, 106 funding, as well as when the appeals for non-determination are determined by the inspector, we could have that right taken away, but still have the cost of implementation. Everyone to a man and woman on that committee understands that measures have to be put in place to make this authority in the past. How's that a bit better? We have said in the past that with regard to planning, we are treading water. We are still treading water, but to be honest with you, the water we are treading is getting deeper and deeper. And, planning is a serious entity which we have to deliver for the people of Somerset. I will stop there, Chairman, but I would like more clarity, as I think many would, on the strategic committee, and I speak for all of us, irrespective of what political persuasion. We would like more information. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I answer Councillor Lott's question, if I could, I'm told that we've identified the problem with the microphones is actually the 4G connectivity in the room. And I think, and I'm looking at Scott, see if I get this right, would you say if anyone's got an EE device, if you could not put it onto the Wi-Fi, is that correct? Possible, switch it off. Or if possible, switch it off, because apparently it's the connectivity between the microphones in the room, which is a problem rather than the microphones themselves. So apologies for that. So if I may.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the question, Councillor, yes, and I think we all share the same concern. When anything changes, there is a real issue. I think it's fair to say planning has struggled since vesting day, particularly because of the vacancies. So in terms of the current funded posts in planning, there are 65.81 full-time equivalent posts currently funded in planning. Assuming, and I'm emphasising that, assuming the budget goes through as written with the pressure bid in the proposals, then there will be in future 71.15 posts in planning. The issue I would say right now is not the number of posts in planning, it's how many of those posts we can actually fill, which is causing the problem. There will also be a business case, which is, we have funding available. This needs to be put together and approved, which is working to reduce the backlog, which will bring in around another 9 full-time equivalent posts for a fixed period to help us get over the backlog we have in planning applications. So we have done quite a lot of work, and I think the team's done a really good job in terms of working through what the problems are, putting together a structure that they think can deliver. We brought in an external consultancy to actually help us specify how many planners we will need and the skill sets and the roles if we got to steady state. So what we're doing is quite right. We're separating out the backlog effectively and what the resource would need to be for steady state going forward. And we're resourcing both of those things to make sure we deal with the backlog and we have enough posts in the structure for the future. You are quite right, however, planning's not an island, and it will be related to highways, it will be related to other posts that we have in the organisation, some of which are affected. So what you can see in Appendix C in the mitigation quite clearly starts to touch on some of that. So I won't give all the examples, but for example, in highways, one of the things that we can look at doing is triaging the planning applications more. Not every single application needs a highways officer to consider it in detail. Lots of applications, we can use the standard advice, which we already do, but we can sharpen that up and actually look, and what the head of what the service director is proposing is that we actually make sure that standard advice is up to date and it picks up applications. So hopefully we won't see all the impacts, but there is that risk, which is why we flagged it to you, that there's a potential for that risk. If we get it wrong, if when we actually get this working, it doesn't work, then we will of course have to fix it. But what we've done with these proposals is the best we can, talking to staff, talking to colleagues, getting the feedback, and using external advisors who are experts in planning services to say, what do we need to spec for the structure going forward? And that is what we built in, including the pressure bid, I should say. So I think we recognise the concern, but the biggest issue for us is going to be, have we got enough funded posts to deliver the service? We believe this structure gives that. The real question is, can we recruit to all those posts? And that's been our ongoing difficulty throughout the year so far. But we will keep working on that, and we have got other proposals which aren't part of this report. Mike Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to point out, I don't want this to turn into a planning sideshow, but as a demonstration of how I think there's been a genuine consultation over this process, we're in quite a different place now in terms of the planning staffing structure than we were at the beginning. I had some significant concerns that we were all aware, for example, of the backlog that's built up of planning applications. We don't get our planning applications through. It has a negative effect on our ability to develop the Somerset economy. It's key to making sure that we get more jobs in the county. And so I'm pleased that through that process, we've got to a point now where we will have greater resource. We will have an additional resource specifically targeted at addressing the backlog, as well as having a level of resource that we're confident in that we can continue to operate once the backlog is out of the way without developing another backlog. So, yeah, I'm pleased that it's not been easy, this, by any means, but I'm pleased that we've got from a point at the beginning of the process where I had significant concerns to one where I don't. So thank you for taking that on board. And I thought I'll just take the opportunity to mention that many people know that I've been lobbying ministers for some years about improving the 4G and 5G signal in Somerset. And I think we've started to make some progress now. So along with most of Somerset's MPs, including Tessa and Adam, who are here today, we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with the Telecoms Minister, Sir Chris Bryant, and he was very keen to hear about difficulties with mobile signal in particular. He also covers broadband, that's another story, but we've had very little input for some time in terms of getting the mobile signal in Somerset improved, and he specifically asked us to lobby hard through the first half of this year because he has a plan for trying to achieve those improvements. So I can't guarantee that we'll get the EE signal better in this particular room, but I'm hoping that we will see significant improvements across the county in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Mason. Sorry, I was two names mixed together.
Thank you, Chair. Most of my points have actually been covered by Tony and Riggers, Councillor Rigby, and Duncan's answer. But I would just like to highlight the idea that I think many of us have, is that planning being a frontline service, and again, I don't want to turn this into a planning show, being a frontline service is what people see, and it's what we all need to work on. I would just ask us to consider the fact that this is one of the things that we need to spend money on. We do need to pay people to come in and do it. We can't be cutting costs to try and get the cheapest available. Sometimes you have to spend. I think this is one of those times. Thank you.
Absolutely agree, Chair. And just please rest assured we're not doing that. So there will be investment, as I say, subject to the budget going through in planning, base service. And we've got the improvement plan, which is being costed and worked up with the external consultants now, which will bring in, we believe it's 9 full-time equivalents, might be more when we get there. And I'd just like to agree the point overall. It's not part of this paper for debate today, Chair, but we've already made a commitment to looking at pay and grade review for the whole council over the next year and a half, because in some parts, particularly where it's professional qualifications, our current pay bands are lower than the market, which is why we struggle to recruit so much. But a large amount of that is a function of vesting day, where we've picked up different terms, conditions, and until we can work all that through with comprehensive pay and grade and review, we are using lots of recruitment allowances, which is perfectly legitimate, but not a long-term way of running the organisation. So we are seeing better recruitment planning because of the changes that the team have already made already, which is about investing more. But we still need to try and work out how we can fully staff up, because whilst we've got vacancies, if they're not covered, obviously we can't get all the work done. So absolutely agree, we've got to invest.
Lucy Tremnell.
Thank you, Chair. So I wanted to talk, there was loads I could have brought up, to be honest with you, but I've stuck to the area that I cover largely. Anyway, so on page 32 of the service impacts for adult operations, it says at the bottom of the page that there will be a potential or partial mitigation via increasing numbers of staff in the final structure proposals using one-off grant money. I wanted to know whether somebody could tell me how many staff that would be and how long that will last for, and how do we make that sustainable ongoing. I also wanted to ask on page 35, where it talks about housing and the impacts on housing. And obviously that has just been moved into a new directorate. So there are new people who are trying to grapple with this. It's undergoing its own transformation within that, and then the overall transformation. And what I wanted to know, it spoke on page 33 about hindering productivity increases to be realised through the transformation programme. I wondered whether the council has confidence that housing will not see an impact on the people who most need it, as in our residents. And then a final point was a more general one that I have made before, but I think it's still relevant. On page 96, it says that I found that the negative outcomes on the impact assessments almost seem to be entirely affecting older, disabled people or those with reduced mobility. And I wondered whether those mitigations on all of the preceding pages will be successful, or do you have confidence they'll be successful in meeting the aims of unitarisation and the transformation, in meeting the relevant elements of, sorry to jump again, point 5 on page 14, which was the desired outcomes. And those relevant ones are putting people of Somerset at the heart of this new authority, caring for our most vulnerable. Is that work? Yep. Okay. And then finally, reducing rural isolation and loneliness, because those were the impacts that seem to come up time and again. And I want to know, do you have confidence that they will be mitigated in the actions that you plan to take? And that is me done. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions. In terms of adults, I can't give you specific numbers unless our Director of Adults wishes to, and she's shaking her head, so we will drop that back to you if that's okay. But what we've tried to do, and it's true in housing as well, it effectively repeats what Councillor Rigby said about planning. The original proposals, which were very much driven to get the conversation going, were significantly more harsh in those areas than the current proposals we're putting forward today. So during the consultation, we have listened, we have put people back into the structure, we have put more money into the structures. And what I said in my presentation, I'm really pleased with that, because what we've now got is much better proposals because they've actually come from the teams. So it's the teams looking at what we've suggested, saying, actually, that doesn't work, but this would, we could do that, we could do this. And that local ownership has given me a huge amount of confidence, because these are the people who have to make that structure work on the 1st of April. And in large part, not in every case, but in large part, we've been able to respond to their consultation feedback and say, yes, actually, we can do more things to try and make that better. In terms of the point about waste, and particularly linking to the equality impact assessment, I think this is flagging the potential risks that we have, obviously, in the protected group. Lots of these do come out as issues of age, and I think some of that's because we understand how the services impact and iterate with those very well. I think you could say quite a lot of this about other protected characteristics as well. But what we're saying very clearly around the waste side is it would be around sister collections and speed at which we can process. Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, it wasn't waste. It was in general. Sorry.
Oh, I apologise. Sorry, you went to waste, then went to that one. I linked the two because that's in the. Okay, well, page 96 was about the impact on age. The first one was around cystic collections, which Okay, and then we're talking about a number of others, but in general terms, we don't believe that the proposals are unfair, otherwise we'd have modified them more than we have. We believe that they are fair overall. They don't target any group inadvertently, they don't target any group at all. But within there will be impacts where services potentially might not be able to offer in the same way. And because a large proportion of service users across the piece will have protected characteristics, those people with protected characteristics would be impacted in the main as equally as everyone else without protected characteristics. There are a couple of areas we've identified in the equality impact assessment where that impact might be more significant because of the protected characteristic, and that's where we try to put the mitigation back in to make sure that that's not the case. So I don't, if I've misunderstood the question, apologies, but if there's something more specific, but I thought you connected the waste point and the age point, so apologies.
No, unfortunately, I'm probably on a different document pack. I was on the public pack. So the page numbers I've got are the page numbers I have printed in front of me. So it was just a general thing that in the impact assessments, when you looked at them, they tended to always come out as a negative impact on the disabled, on older people, and on rural isolation and loneliness. And on what I've got as page 14, there is a section that talks about, it's point 5, and it talks about those different aims from this transformation and from going unitary. And some of those aims, I won't read them out again, but I just wondered if we are more likely to impact those areas, how we can meet those aims.
Thank you. So in terms of meeting those aims, the restructuring is not all the council does. So the restructuring is about how we deploy the resource within the organisation to try and deliver our services. And what we try to identify in the equality impact assessment is where we think services will not be at the same standard they are now. Does that have a differential impact on people with protected characteristics? If so, can we mitigate that, and are we comfortable that that's acceptable or not? And that's what we try to lay out in the equality impact assessments. In terms of are we meeting the aims overall, there are many programmes that will answer that question, not just this paper. So when we talk about looking after vulnerable people, we've got a whole piece of work we're just launching looking at safeguarding arrangements. We've got many different initiatives in both adults, children and communities where we're actually looking at how we deal with vulnerability, how we protect people who are maybe vulnerable because of risk of homelessness. So I can't answer the question just from this paper about how we're delivering the overall aims and ambitions of LGR. What this paper does is actually put the structure together that we believe will allow us to deliver the programmes that do meet those aims. But the structure itself doesn't do that alone. It enables it.
Okay, Dave Mansell.
Yeah, try this one. Here you
It
go.
worked earlier. All right, there we go. Trying another one. All right, thank you. So now then, there's a few things I would like to say, and I think that the first one is perhaps the most important, and that is this council is underfunded. That is the reason we are in this very sorry position. Now, unfortunately, due to that, we have to balance the budget, and this restructure is needed. It will have a benefit of at last completing the reorganisation process to the new single unitary council. It will also change the council, though, and not necessarily for the better. And I have to say, for me, and I think many others, it leaves a lot of concerns. As the process has proceeded, I have been pleased to see that there have been alterations in what was proposed, especially the big reduction in highways maintenance and in the area offices that was originally proposed. Very pleased to see that has been completely reversed because it would have been disastrous. Similarly, I'm pleased that the footpath wardens, the reduction there is now smaller than it was. Like Councillor Trimnell, I couldn't help but have my attention drawn to page 14, where I was sort of reading that and thinking, this is great. Lovely, worthy list of better desired outcomes. It looks good. But I very quickly thought, I've read the paper, there's no detail on how these things will be achieved. So, you know, what's going on here? The reality is that the changes will greatly reduce the capacity of this council to deliver, and it does require big changes in how teams are managed and how they will work. There will be a reduction of 555 posts since April 2024. I think many of us know that lots left before then, so the number is actually greater than that. There's also lots of vacant posts being held. So a lot of changes, a lot of good staff have been lost. Now, some of this would result from reorganisation, creating a single council from those that were there before, but much of this goes well beyond. And I have to say it is to be greatly regretted, and seeing some of the officers we have lost and the teams that we're losing, very sad. I will highlight a few. There's changes in planning which have been talked about in a number of areas. One is in enforcement, which is in this paper, to reduce the enforcement service, which is not at all welcome. I can at least be consoled that when we come to the budget at our next meeting, there is a pressure bid in that to rectify that, and as I understand it, put it back to closer where it should be, but the proposal here is a very regrettable reduction. In transport, a lack of capacity which could reduce the opportunities for funding and improving things going forward. As has been said from the Equalities Impact Assessment for SEND, Special Educational Needs and Disabilities, big changes and concerns whether this is going to work right. For waste, which was a team that was already one team across all the councils previously, we started off with 23 staff in that section when the council started. We're now taking it down to 13. And again, the paper highlights there are concerns at what the effect will be, especially in terms of the service provided to vulnerable customers. Also, though, in how householders are helped with the service rules, which are important, and in both cases could result in a false economy, especially if it results in people disposing and wasting of waste instead of putting it to recycling, because disposal costs lots more and there is a risk that will be one outcome. In climate, an area we should be rightly concerned about and one of the council's main priorities, the original proposal was to take the team down to a grand total of 1. Now, it has been said that the work addressing the climate emergency will be embedded across all teams, and that's good and that's right and is a right way to proceed. So absolutely fine with that and wish to see that happen, and there are good examples of that happening. But we also need to work at a corporate level. There's a lot to be done to make sure as a council as a whole we're heading in the right direction and doing the things that matter. The paper itself says we are going to work with partners. So there has been some acknowledgement of this. This team, our central climate team, are going to go up from 1 to 2. This is just not enough. That is nowhere near the capacity we need to devote to that area. Very disappointed in that and in the other ones mentioned as well. I mean, I hope it will work, and some of it will well do, and we need to try to make it work. But I have big doubts, big concerns, and sorry, I cannot support the recommendations.
Mike Hewitson, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as Chair of the Audit Committee, I'm naturally interested in the finance function. It seems to me that our senior finance officers have been incredibly stretched through the financial emergency, through a huge number of additional audits and the backlog of local government reorganisation. I'm very pleased to see that the representations that have been made regarding the
importance and status of the 151 officer have been reflected in the final structure. This is something that SIPFA had concerns about, and a number of us felt was not necessarily helpful. I'm very pleased to see that that has been reflected in the structure, but my question is whether there's enough senior finance support in the new structure. I'm conscious that we've got a huge amount of pressure on them, and do we believe that that the team has enough resource here, because it really does underpin the delivery of every other service that the council provides. Without accurate, without strategic, and without really good advice, I think we can end up spending more money than we need to, or not realising some of the savings that may be potentially achievable. So if I could put that question to the Chief Exec, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. Yes, I think we've looked quite carefully in this area, and I'd reflect and agree entirely with you that we've had too many colleagues under a huge amount of pressure, because particularly the work on the restructuring and the need to get that right for everyone's sake, as well as at the same time the budget in difficult circumstances. We do believe that the structure does give sufficient senior management capacity, but what we need to do is be able to support the teams, fill vacancies, so they can take on some of the work that's floated up to senior managers and give the senior managers more time to actually do their job of planning, coordination and that strategic piece. So if we don't get that, we'll have to look again at how we actually balance that responsibility. But we think the structure does have the right number of people. We have tested it against a number of other places as well for councils of this size, and it looks like it's in line. They're all different. I wouldn't want to say as a standard, but please be assured part of the investment in Chief Finance Officer has been not to load those posts up with a lot more operational responsibilities. So the Chief Finance Officer post would be able to look effectively as a current interim Chief Finance has been doing at the finances of the strategy across the whole organisation, rather than also have to pick up a range of service or delivery responsibilities. So we think that's sufficient. If it's not, we will have to come back to it. In virtually all parts of the council, there's a statutory responsibility to make sure we provide enough resource to do the job appropriately. We'll have to keep everything under review, but we do think that works for now.
Will Wren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry. Councillor Butt-Philip started a stable and sustainable council. And in my experience, if you're in a strong and sustainable place and you get moved out of that, it's actually very difficult to drop anchor again and become safe and stable and sustainable. What I see here are so many changes, and so many mitigations are required to make the changes work. So, for example, quite a lot of them seem to depend on external funding, but I'd be very interested to know how that is going to work. If we're going to be supporting various services through external funding, will staff be on short-term contracts, which are only available until the funding runs out? It's clear there will be increased workloads with fewer staff. There's no doubt about that. We're going to have to start using AI much better, and I'm sure there are some applications which will be really good. But I do know AI causes concern amongst a lot of people. There's an extra dependence on partners. There's delegation of our functions to other councils, and we've seen how that can put them into difficulty financially as well. And there will be lower service standards. So overall, I'm very concerned about this package. I mean, planning has been mentioned quite a lot. I don't think anybody's mentioned the legal support for planning. And I would like some clarification on how that's going to work, because we simply cannot run a planning function without decent legal support, either in the room or negotiating agreements and things like that, particularly at a time when the government is not so much moving the goalpost, it's taking them out of the stadium. And so I think we may have a planning team or a planning function that is fit for purpose at the moment, but with the increasing housing targets and everything else going on, increasing appeals, particularly if the government is serious, and I think I saw it in this report about removing extensions of time, are we really happy that we have enough people in the team going forward in order to cope with this? And then there's the local plan. That's something else that hasn't come up, and yet the it says progress will be stalled. So there's real implications for lower delivery across the council. There's the flood team. I understand that's lost resources, which is something I couldn't find anywhere in the papers. And we've mentioned rights of way, waste and send. And then there's the Ombudsman. We will increase the interest of the Ombudsman in us, and we don't perform very well against it at the moment. So Lord knows what it's going to be after that. So I return to the two words stable and sustainable, and I'm sort of, as you can see, I'm scratching my head. But it's not down to us. Local government, as I think has been said elsewhere, is broken. And I think, you know, I hope I speak for us all, that we would rather be anywhere else than sitting in this room debating this because of practice by third parties that we have very little control over. What I can't say, what I can't understand is why the government is pushing other councils to follow the well-trodden unitary path, given where we find ourselves, and I think some of the other unitaries are in similar difficulties. So, I've been just informed. We are in difficulties on the unitary path. But what I'm trying to say is really that until we've sorted out adults and children's social care as going to be properly funded, I really don't see how we can go forward with local government organisation with any sense of security or stability or sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. There were quite a number of elements in there, so I might not take it quite in order, if that's okay, Councillor Wren. I think the first thing to say overall is that the process we've gone through has outlined a proposal in terms of structure, and it's consulted on it. What you have in the paper today is the areas where the teams are saying to us they think there will potentially be impacts. So the only areas where we're saying to you are the three areas identified in the appendix, which you've rightly identified. That's where we're saying we think there could be adverse impacts on the services. You mentioned about staff having to work harder to do the same job because there are fewer people. That's not where we want to be, and that's not what we said. What we said very, very clearly is we've inherited a set of processes as a new organisation from predecessor councils. We have given staff permission to change processes, to make efficiencies, to get rid of the bureaucracy within the organisation, to actually make these work. We do not want a structure that relies on people working more hours than they should be or having to do two people's jobs, because that's just bad management. We've got the ability within the organisation to decide how we do most things ourselves. And what we need to do is free up our managers to actually lead and make those decisions. And what we've seen throughout this process is that that's what people have been doing because they've started to make these structures theirs. So these proposals do identify three areas where we think there might be impact on services. They identify potential risks in other areas that we believe we've mitigated either fully or in part. And that's what's also identified in the appendix. So we have tried to be very straight about that. We cannot make this level of change without there being impacts. But where people have flagged the impact to us, we have tried to take action to put more resource in or change the mechanisms or process. It may well be we need to come back and say, actually, in those areas that worked, great, we can take that off the list. In a couple of areas that might not work, we need to do something additional. But at this point in time, that's what we collectively as officers have got fed through consultation, and that's what we believe the correct mitigation is. You mentioned a couple of areas. So legal, I think, from memory, has 0.3 full-time equivalent difference between the current structure and the new structure. There are some areas of the council, obviously I won't name any of them, where we know we struggle. But this proposal was not about trying to improve every area of the council that wasn't working already. That would be a different proposal where we're coming back to council saying, please, can you invest in these areas and give us more resource? This proposal was about putting together a workable structure that allows us to deliver the organisation. In some areas, there is more work to do. And in those areas, we will need to come and talk to members about that. But fairly, if we'd hidden that in this process, you'd have been making decisions that wouldn't be appropriate for you to make in terms of funding things that it wasn't quite clear why. So we've been very clear that this is a restructuring to give us the structure we need going forward. It is not trying to fix all the elements in the council that weren't right to start with. And the report is very, very clear. This doesn't deliver all of the outcomes of the council. It enables us to have a staffing structure which can go forward and start to deliver those programmes. It's not a panacea. It's not everything in itself, I'm afraid.
Lee Redmond.
Chair, thank you. I wanted to start by saying that I know why we're at this point and understand the need for the restructure. I'm not alone in wanting to recognise the hard work that has gone into this paper and the conscientious way our officers have worked. All of this does not make it right. A number of my concerns have been covered. I want to support the comments made before me by Councillor Mansell. I won't regurgitate the past. We need to look to the future. I've made no secret of my concern that the service we provide to the residents of Somerset is falling short and will, I believe, because of this restructure, fall further. We're sacrificing staff that have vast amounts of knowledge and experience. I want to try and find some positives in our current position. I'm sorry, I can't. I've said it before, but I believe we are out of control now. I appreciate the hard work that has gone into getting us here, but because of the size of the workload and being forced into a shortened process, the size of staffing cuts and the speed of the restructure will mean that we won't know the full impact until it's too late. Making the council fit the financial position we find ourselves is going to be a bad thing. The council that will be left because of this proposal will mean we will fail residents. My hope is that the failures won't be terminal. We've heard many comments, many concerns, many reassurances. Today, I believe, is a bad day for Somerset Council. This is a vast paper impacting every corner of our council. My question, Chair, we've heard today that, and I'll paraphrase, senior leaders will be ready to evolve. This is not a good place to be. This may need to be responded to by Councillor Butt-Philip, but can I ask, are the executive comfortable with this? It seems to me that senior officers are saying that even today, as we agree this structure, there will be a need to fix things as we go along. Is that right? Thank you, Chair.
Duncan.
So thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you'll bring Councillor Butt-Philip in if he wishes to. I can't comment on the number of the comments that Councillor Redmond's rightly made. Where we are financially is where we are, and there are national reasons for that and local reasons for that, which it's not appropriate for me to comment on. As I say, this paper does not fix every issue within the council. This paper is not the only thing the council is doing. This paper gives a stable staffing base to the organisation at a price that we believe fits within the budget profile that you've made available for us, and that in a way that we believe minimises the impacts on the public and on our staff as well. There are 3 areas we've identified where we've still got concerns about the impact on services, and we flagged those up to you. In terms of the overall position, I would hope that the organisation as a whole continues to evolve. This is not about ending change. This is a start that gives people the ability to work out how they want to develop and improve services in the future. This will give us the ability to work out across the organisation where we need to be investing to deliver member priorities in the future. That hasn't been as easily accessible before because of a lack of clarity. So I'm afraid I can't touch on a number of the points. I think Councillor Redmond rightly flagged, not for me to comment, but those issues will still be with us. This paper has never presented itself as being a panacea to all the problems of the organisation. What it gives us is a stable position to move forward from, which will allow us to address other problems that we've got.
Theo, we'll let you come back as you were named.
As the Chief Executive has said, this does not solve all of our problems. We have identified the issues we think are likely to arise. We have mitigated them. We have identified areas where there is still work to be done. But of course, over the coming years, we will continually be seeking to improve the situation. We will be continually looking for areas where we are falling below where we wish to be and trying to improve. That is what we should always be doing with or without this restructure. Councillor Redman tells us that making the council fit the finances available is a mistake. I am unclear as to what the alternative to living within our means would be. We know, because the arguments are very well rehearsed, that the biggest pressure we're facing comes from adult social care. We know of the urgency for the government to address this issue. It is not a Somerset specific issue, it is a national issue. And we know that the government is urgently stepping in by setting up a commission to report in 3 years' time of how they are going to fix the problem. I would encourage any member here who has contacts within the government to put the case that that is not fast enough and we urgently need action now.
Councillor Wakefield, did you want to come in on?
Yes, on the same point, really. I just wanted to say that obviously as the lead member for the biggest spending department, I just think it's important to point out, first of all, in answer to what was said about the equalities impact assessment, the reason that's so important is so that we know where the effects will be. It's absolutely crucial. There are countries in the world, there are parties in this country that do not believe in impact equality assessments. And it's really important that we do this work. And this council will be aware of those people who are going to possibly be adversely affected and be looking after them as best we can. I also wanted to say that with any cuts in service, which we all know have gone on across the country for years under different governments, things don't get better usually. However, in adult social care, we have gone through a transformation. We have saved £10 million and more this year on a budget, a huge budget, I know. It can be done. Transformation can be good for the council. You can save money and you can do things well. And one of the things we do really well is prevention work. And that is the sort of thing that wouldn't happen in a not very well run council and may be cut out if we had a section 114 notice. The prevention work we do, the work we do to keep people out of institutions and to keep them at home as long as possible is so important for our residents. And we will continue to do that work despite the challenges that we face.
Thank you. Edric Hobbs.
Thank you, Chair. Working? Yep. Question possibly for Duncan and maybe Theo. I've spoken to several senior officers who are quite long-standing, who are struggling with workloads, and I think their mental health is suffering. And they agree that if they take time off due to mental health, the workload will still be there when they come back. I'd just like assurances from you, maybe Theo, that our pastoral care and mental health support for officers, some of these are long-standing officers. I'm not going to name anybody. Maybe we'll have a private discussion away from this forum. But I would like to make sure that our pastoral care and mental health support for officers, some quite senior officers, is there. I would assume it would be, but I'd just like some assurances in a public forum and maybe to the members of Unison who are sat listening to this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would really welcome, if it's appropriate, if you could maybe talk to me afterwards about any individuals just to make sure it is working. We've got quite extensive support available, but I have to say, as we know, and it's an ongoing issue, support can be available. It doesn't necessarily mean that people take it up, and it also means if they try to, it doesn't always work for them because it's very individual. So we've got a whole set of formal mechanisms in terms of external support that we commissioned, which people can access anonymously and get professional support, both clinically qualified as well as the more pastoral side. Obviously, management support individuals directly, and that's our usual first point of call. But we've also got a whole set of internal mechanisms, such as mental health first aiders and so on, that we deployed, and other groups as well within the staff organisation. Quite often with volunteers, who we should be very grateful for, because it's an onerous job that people take on. So there's a lot of support around. Unfortunately, we just know in that area particularly that doesn't necessarily mean people access it, and it doesn't mean when they do it works exactly for them. So very happy to have a further conversation if I'm not putting you in a position of having to break any confidence. Just in terms of a general point, we have a lot of people who are working too hard, lots of people in the room and lots of people in the organisation. and I am worried genuinely about the pressure in the organisation. This will help release it. It won't solve the problem, but if we can get the budget put to bed early March, if we can get the restructuring and the interviews and the recruitment processes that will arise from that put to bed by the 1st of April, we take away two very big pieces of work, which have probably been dominating a lot of people's time. And that frees up some of the support services, such as finance and HR and project management office, to actually be able to help other people then, whereas right now they're being fairly solely dedicated to putting this piece of work through in the budget. So I think moving on will make that easier. I am genuinely worried we will still have too much pressure, and that's part of the conversation we're going to have as officers after 1st of April, which is about working styles within the organisation. Because I think we have inherited a lot of organisational culture, which was quite hierarchical, which means things get pushed up. And what we need to do is work really hard. We've done some of it already, but the restructurings rather stop that for a bit. We need to start pushing that back down and empower people and support them to do their jobs, because the people who know their job the best are the people doing it, not their managers or the managers' managers. That would hopefully release some of that tension. But we do have a piece of work to keep a very close eye on that, because I don't want to be an organisation where people get hurt for those sorts of reasons.
Henry Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't remember which of our portfolio holders that were dealing with transport actually got the head of the rights of way team to admit that he had accepted applications which were not valid. I think it was Mike Rigby, but I apologise, Richard, if I was wrong. The situation is that we are suggesting that we need to bring back 2 rights-of-way officers to deal with applications and maintenance. Now, if we were managing the rights-of-way team correctly and we were following the Blue Bible, which I've forgotten to bring with me this morning, we would have less than 80 applications which would put in legally that follow that Bible. And the situation is that we are accepting applications which are not new. And I'm sorry, in my nerdy way, I've gone into detail. It is a matter of priorities to me, and it's a matter of management that we are following the rules to minimise the amount of staff and work we need on rights of way. Now, my rural parishes, I have 13 rural parishes, are almost all of them got a right of way team which are managed by the officers to do open up and ensure that we have the rights of way able to be used. We need to make more use of those rural parishes, because unlike the towns, they don't have anything that we can hand down to them apart from filling in potholes and the other things on the highways and the rights of way. I do not see the need to prioritise the rights of way team over the highways people. And I'll give you an example. In my division, I have 5 bridge buttresses that were damaged and broken on May the 9th, 2023. Those 5 highway bridges have not been touched because we do not have the money to be able to mend them. And yet we are looking at mending 3 or 4 rights of way bridges which are closed at the moment and have some of them being closed for 2 or 3 years, and yet they are being suggested that we need to prioritise them over the highways. I wish to propose that we remove the reinstatement of the rights of way officers. I have a seconder, and that's my proposal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'll answer the question, and then I think you're going to ask the monitoring officer to just speak about the idea of an amendment, if that's okay. Thank you, Councillor Hobhouse, for the question. Just so everyone's cited, the current rights of way team employs 23.4 full-time equivalents. The original proposal at consultation was to go down to 15.4 full-time equivalents, which is a 34% reduction in the staff complement. After consultation and additional work, the proposal we're going with is to go down to 17.7 full-time equivalents plus 0.6 of a full-time equivalent with external funding that's been found. That's still a 26% reduction. I think it's difficult to say that we're prioritising the rights of way team with a 26% reduction to the existing staffing base. There isn't an equivalence. The works that you're talking about, and I'm aware of some of the bridges, I didn't realise it was 5, but I'm aware of some, are about the ability we have in financial terms to deliver network work and improvements, some of which is tied up to insurance, some of which is tied up to our capital ability, some of which is about revenue funding. A change in the rights of way team wouldn't make any difference to those positions. What we're saying here is that the team have come back at consultation, other people have come back at consultation, and we think this is a better proposal that will give better value for money by putting that additional, I think it's 1.3 posts back into the structure. It just allows a coordination within the team to work better. Where that leaves us is that we still have a significant backlog. So if I can refer you to the paper, on the modern Gov version, just in case people are on different pages, page 85 is the start of the equality impact assessment around rights of way. We already have substantial backlogs in terms of applications waiting to be determined to get onto the definitive map. I have a number of other councillors in the room who I won't in any way speak for, who I know from my correspondence with them have got exactly the opposite problem you've got. They really want people to be working in the rights of way to get issues on the network fixed, to get things added to definitive rights, and to get potholes and things on networks resolved. And again, we don't have sufficient resource to do that to people's satisfaction. So I think the difficulty we have is we're not prioritising the rights of way team. What we're saying is the proposal we started out with was too severe, and by putting in 1.3 posts additional to that proposal, we can get a better proposal for the overall team. But that is not in any way, shape or form stopping any other work going ahead on the highway. It is purely the fact that we think that's a better proposal than one we started out with. But I'll leave it to you, Chairman, because obviously you have to make a decision about the proposal for amendment.
Can I defer to Alan just to make a comment?
Chair, in terms of advice, the purpose of this paper, as members will note, is for endorsement. So the purpose is to debate the matter, to be able to consider that and provide feedback to the Chief Executive prior to his decision, which we're scheduling for tomorrow as part of that process. Clearly, amendments should have been presented in advance of this meeting to me in order to give them consideration and give members the ability to consider them moving forward. However, if there is a matter for all of council to support Councillor Hobhouse's view of this, then it's something that the Chief Executive could consider as part of his final deliberations when making the decision. But it's not a final decision on the structure that's being decided today. It's an endorsement of the structure. So the views and considerations of council can be taken into account when the Chief Executive makes his decision.
Thank you. I think on that point, it's pretty clear that obviously the amendment can't be taken in this case. And obviously the point that you've made can be noted by the Chief Exec. Whether you...
I'm very happy if that's a decision, Chair, to speak to Councillor Hobhouse after the meeting if he's got time and just make sure I fully understood the concern.
I'll allow you just to come back, Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fundamental point for me in my division is that the £100,000 that the two officers being reinstated would be better spent mending the bridges that were broken in the 9th of May 2023, and other people have got the same problems. I understand that, than spent on officers being reinstated for the right of way team.
Thank you. I think the offer by the Chief Exec to speak to you on this point and to take in consideration in this way is the only way that we can go forward on this point. I'd like now to proceed to the next speaker, which is Faye Purbrick.
Thank you, Chair. I will try and be brief. My points relate particularly to the recommendations of this paper. Firstly, a question on the endorsement of the organisation structure, recognising everything that we've heard both from colleagues and from members in this room. I think there are concerns One of my concerns is actually how long it's taken us to get to this point. There's been a lot of reference to the business case and the transition arrangements and savings from that. These should have been delivered many years ago before the financial emergency was even declared, but we are where we are. My question on this structure is around the reinstatement of a 151 officer at the executive level. It was just 9 months ago when we were reassured and many members voted not to remove the 151 officer from this level, and that proceeded, and presumably costs were incurred for that redundancy, costs were incurred for an interim, and now costs will be incurred if you reinstate this position to recruit somebody. So what I'd like to understand is this the final change that you expect to see at that level that was settled allegedly in May last year? And if it is, how much will the additional cost be of having to change and go back to having an exec level 151? And if it's not the only change, will we be looking at seeing annual relooks at the structure, or is it something that will come back on an ad hoc basis as the chief executive and executive decide to change priorities? On the second recommendation, I think my big concern on this, and all of the changes that have been talked about have been debated heavily at various committees, scrutiny, executive, and here again today. But what concerns me is, as it's just been pointed out, this isn't a vote to approve, it's a vote to note, which almost reflects the lack of control that any members have and will have on this restructure. To suggest that a structure is going to be decided on tomorrow that will then have further cuts or increases to service levels that won't take place until May is concerning. To suggest that there will be no recourse to elected members as to what that will mean. And I hope that that will only be in the cases where it's not policies that are being changed that must come through our scrutiny processes. But I'm just seeking some reassurance really how much more impact we can expect to see coming through in May, and will we be again just to ask to mutely note these changes? Overall, the change in structure, as I've said, is something that I believe we should have done sooner. I believe that if you look at the original business case that so many people have referred to, these changes, the transition changes, the bringing together of 5 councils were actually originally programmed to be finished at the end of the summer in 2023. The financial emergency came months later, and now in 2025, we're still considering this. So I understand there have been many impacts that have caused us to take this route, and it's not been anybody's decision but the executive and the CEO's team who have had the right to make those decisions, and I recognise that. But I think we need to move away from trying to compare what we are doing to what was suggested. And we need to look very seriously at what transformation will mean to this council and how we can start to look, hopefully from this point forward, at what it is we want to achieve. Because I recognise on page 14 in section 5, we're referring to some really clear principles that were identified in 2018 by all of the historical councils in something called the Folgus Report, The Future of Local Government in Somerset. And we sit here now in February 2025, hopefully saying that we are going to look at this as the way we move forward. And rather than looking at how much money we want to cut and save, what we want to achieve and how we shape our council to deliver that. So that would be my ask when the CEO considers his structure, and just to make sure that any policies and things that should be scrutinised by elected members are brought forward in a timely manner so that they can be debated appropriately. But I welcome your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the questions. If I could take slight issue with the first point, I think it's a little bit harsh saying that it should have done before we declared a financial emergency. The LGR case was 18 million pound saving over a 2-year period after vesting day. Actually, we're still in that 2-year period.
I can show you the programme that I have on my computer, if you like, that shows the facts that I'm talking about that were delivered through the various scrutinies of the different councils. But we can agree to disagree if you like.
Speak about the things I saw published, I'm afraid, but the target I inherited was 18 through LGR, and we're still in that 2-year period, and this proposal makes more than those as savings. We already have made savings as part of the LGR as well in the first year by reviewing management and reducing that, and taking out of the post, there were a number of savings that have already been logged, which are not in the £34 million because they were in the first year's savings. So very, very happy we can trade figures on that one. But I just think we were in financial difficulty within the first 4 months of vesting day. And I think if we'd had due diligence on the actual original cases, we might have been able to take action sooner. But that seemed to be unknown at the time. So, you know, I'm very happy we come back to those. In terms of the CFO, we've budgeted £200,000 within these proposals. So that's within the figures that we quoted. And yes, that is different. You know, we went forward on the basis that we'd be able to manage with a Section 151 officer at service director level. I still think that was a viable position, but what we've had is quite a lot of feedback from both external partners such as Grant Thornton, expressions of concern from the audit committee and members on the audit committee, and also the peer review and a number of other people. So we've reacted to that pressure and said, actually, yeah, of course it strengthens the organisation to have that capacity additional. And I think for me, it was about the capacity. Some of your original comments were, oh, well, the SIP for guidance says that accountants should be at the top table. And that didn't really help us as an organisation. But what the peer challenge report says is actually that the capacity that the CFO represents is something we really need right now. And I think that's absolutely true. So that's why we have changed the position and we're proposing to put that post back in. In terms of the second recommendation, yes, absolutely. So what we said is that service directors are going to be able to look at revised service standards. If that means stopping services moving away from existing policies, of course, that will need to come back for conversation. And in May, we're not proposing to have a whole review of everything, but what we will be saying is that if there's anything that is changing that needs to be commented on, of course, it will go through scrutiny. It might need to go back to executive, depending what it is. I'm not thinking we'll have an annual review per se of these proposals, but every year you will have a report which is about the structure of the council. It may well be, if there's not significant changes, that it's as simple as the current structure, but that is why the structure is always published in the Constitution every year to meet that requirement. So it will be a live conversation. In terms of the May date as well, that is where we have to say what are the impacts that we're seeing. Obviously, at this point in time, they're what we think they will be. After April, we'll be able to see what they actually are, and that's why we want to make sure we're reporting back very quickly. So, yeah, none of the process of the council will be avoided in those reports. You will get involved as members at the appropriate level, whatever that would be, depending what the impact is.
Andy Kendall.
Sorry, Chair, can I just come back?
If it's a very quick one, Faye, please.
Yeah, just I didn't get an answer on the costs of letting go and hiring. I'm happy to take it as a written answer. I appreciate I didn't get time to put it in beforehand, but I would welcome understanding what the impact of that has been, and also whether the 200,000 for the 151 officer is with on costs or whether that's going to be a considerable uplift on the banding for that position at an exec level. Thanks. Happy to take it in writing.
Well, I'm sorry, I will have to go for it because I don't know the actual cost. What I would say is all the costs of what we did are published because they obviously went to council previously, so you do have that, but we can dig that out for you and let you know. And in terms of the £200,000 being allowed for, I think that includes some direct on cost, but it probably doesn't include all of our usual overheading, so it'd probably be slightly more than that when you look at accommodation and things like that as well.
Andy Kendall.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to refer to something very simple. On page 18, paragraph 17, the third bullet point, it reads, those who are on family leave who have been given notice of redundancy and are covered by the relevant legislation must be given priority consideration over others who have been given notice of redundancy. I don't quite understand what you're saying there. If you could just elaborate it in a different way.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. So this is a purely legal issue that people who are on family leave have a higher level of protection from redundancy. So therefore, as it says in here, they must be given a priority when looking at selection processes. This was actually a change during the consultation process. The legislation, as people had understood it before, meant it was even stronger protection and that people who were on family leave would not be able to be going under redundancy. but there was a case law point that set precedent which clarified that position. So we did have to go back to some colleagues, I'm afraid, as part of the consultation and say, actually, the regulation underneath this has changed. Sorry, the case law underneath this has changed. So it is exactly as laid out now. What this actually means is that if people have been given a notice of redundancy and they meet the minimum requirement for any of the vacant posts we have, then virtually certainly we'd have to be appointing them because of the protection that the law affords. Yeah, which I have to say is a good thing, by the way.
Martin Wale.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm behind the pillars to the right of the door and in front of the lawnmower behind me. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate Chairman of Strategic Planning, Tony Locke, on his remarks and totally agree with every word he said. But I would suggest they're on a strategic level, and I'd like to address you now on a councillor and public level rather than that. I think we all understand that as per the agenda, any proposed changes to service delivery as a result of organisation proposals will impact on service standards. But to what extent should we allow that impact to affect services? As a councillor, I, and I'm sure most of us, spend large amounts of time on planning matters, even if you don't sit on a planning committee. Also, of course, equal amounts of time are spent on complaints, etc. for the Highways Department. Again, if you attend parish or town councils, you receive complaints about some, if not all, of the functions of these two statutory services. A number of the proposals we are being asked to vote on will, in my opinion, increase workload on both these services, particularly in relation to appeals and claims and necessary legal costs. In relation to planning on page 47, we have the reduction of the planning liaison officers reporting to planning committees. How that can be effective when most planning applications have some element of planning input, and in the case of an outline planning application, that is the most important aspect of that particular planning application. This must surely increase the costs of appeals and legal matters, which will certainly do away with any savings that might be made in the reduction of this highways team. Page 52, we go on to planning enforcement. And we have the proposals that we were only going to handle red priority cases. Some of us might, who's had anything to do with enforcement, say that might even be an improvement to what's going on at the moment. And I know this is not a statutory service, but the reputational damage caused by the large amount of outstanding cases is of great concern to any councillor who attends parish or town councils. On page 46, there's another cause, in my opinion, of damage to our reputation in the downgrading of the rights of way. Whether you can actually downgrade at this moment is arguable, as it would appear to clear the backlog of current work would take any number of some calculate over 30 years. These remarks I'm making now as not being made in any political point, not at any political point at all, but as an elected councillor who month in and month out has to face the taxpayers at various council meetings and also face to face when they phone and email, and have to try to report to the councils and those members of the public on behalf of this council. When trying to answer these concerns, it's not easy to explain why the statutory services which they and me are most concerned about are not functioning properly and fully. These measures which we're proposing on today is not going to, in the long run, help reduce the budget. In my opinion, because of the legal parts of these departments, they will only increase it. I therefore cannot support the recommendations on the agenda, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question and comments, Councillor. And no, I absolutely accept them in the spirit which you've given them. I think I'd covered a point about highways planning previously, so I won't dwell, Chair, but just say it does lay out on page 47 the mitigation. I appreciate that is mitigation. It is not necessarily the current setup. It's talking about how we triage applications, how we make sure that they focus the highways resource in the right places for applications that they move forward. And it's about how we use standing advice more effectively. Actually, I have to say, if we get that right, I do think there should be no detrimental impact, but it may well take time to make sure we get that landed. Page 52 on enforcement officers, the original proposal was to reduce the number of enforcement officers in planning. With the pressure bid that's been submitted, that would mean that there is no reduction, so it'll be the same number of posts in the enforcement service as there is now. I take the point that a number of councillors would make, and I know again from my inbox, Chair, a number of councillors do share this concern, that we don't have sufficient enforcement resource already in the planning function. I know when out on a ward visit, that's been mentioned to me on a couple of occasions as well. I'll just remind members that the proposals for the restructure were not about investing in services behind closed doors effectively. If we need investment proposals for services, they need to come to you as investment proposals as part of the budget, as we have done for planning and for antisocial behaviour and so on. But what we have done here is say, well, we agree that there would be a bigger detriment if we'd taken out 25% of the staff base for enforcement. So the proposal is that that gets put back in, subject to the budget being approved. And I won't comment further on rights of way, Chair, just say that I think it exactly illustrates the point that I made to Councillor Hobhouse, that councils have different views about the effectiveness and the efficiency of taking out posts in the rights of way team. We all agree it will mean it will take longer to get things onto the definitive map and other pieces of work done. That's why it's in the appendices flagging up that those are impacts potentially that we'll have to face.
Diogo Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chairman. First, I just want to say to any staff who may be watching or watching back to this meeting that we recognise the pressures that they're under and the uncertainty that they've gone through over the last couple of years. And I think from the Conservative group, I could say that we value you. Thank you for the work you've done and that you're all very much important to the organisation. Based on what I've heard today, just a couple of points really. We've seen Unison have raised repeated concerns about the lack of detailed, costed business case and the inadequacy of detail. What we see is Unison, Unite, members of the public, the opposition, all have criticised the way this council has handled the reorganisation structure and what the future will look like as a result. And touching on what Councillor Purbrick mentioned earlier as well, something I've noted in this debate, the defence, responses and commentary in the responses to the questions and comments made are coming mainly from officers. And that confuses me, though I understand, but it confuses me because let's be clear, in my view, officers advise, recommend, politicians are elected to drive and decide. And I just want to put to the record, the politicians driving this council, leading the reorganisation process, putting the proposal to us, are the Liberal Democrats. But one point from Mr. Sharkey. He said earlier that once all this is done, we'll have a stable workforce. But later on, he said we'll still have pressures in the workforce. Does he mean that we will have stable pressures in the workforce then? We know the workforce has been unstable for about 2 years now. So when will we have that stable workforce? Is there a target date? Can you give clarity to our staff?
Thank you, and thank you for the comments as well about staff at the beginning of your comments. I think we said that many times as officers, and absolutely agree. I won't touch on some of the points that I don't think for me to respond to, Chair, if that's okay. But just in terms of for governance in a general point. The reason I'm doing most of the talking today is under the legislation as head of paid service, this decision falls to me. The decision that members have already made in setting the budget last year was to actually allocate the amount of money for future years that we thought was going to be available. Now, obviously, that needs to be confirmed in budget setting in February, but that's where this piece of work has come from. Unfortunately, for everyone in terms of having to listen to me, it means that it's me. I'm forward and I'm making that. But these are collectively officer proposals across the whole organisation. Of course, in a big organisation, not everyone agrees with every single page, but we have worked very hard to try and pull this together with all of our colleagues, and we've worked very hard to try and engage and respond to comments that have been made by all sorts of other people, including trade unions and members of the public. In terms of the comment, I think I was trying to say stable structure. If I said stable workforce, apologies. So we will have a stable structure as a result of this, which will give our workforce stability because they know what the jobs are that are going forward. They understand how they work with each other. They understand the management structures. That stability is what most people are calling out for. That's where people are being confused or upset because they've been left with structures that haven't been updated. And that's where we do get this. I think it's a real boost to a lot of people because it gives certainty about structure going forward. In terms of pressures, we'll always have pressures as an organisation, whether they're financial pressures, whether they're pressures because we've got additional workload coming in and additional demand, whether they're pressures about whether we can recruit or not. There will always be pressures to be dealt with, but this structure doesn't create those pressures. This structure gives us a really good basis to address those pressures from.
Mandy Chilcott.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've heard a lot of concerns already in the meeting today about the paper we have before us. And I also hear the concerns of our staff and their concerns that services will suffer as a result for the people of Somerset. I also would like to remind everybody that the council is its staff and the staff are our council. There is no council without our staff, and you just cannot mitigate away the loss of 555 jobs across an organisation without affecting service standards, and the level of risks have not been, to my mind, fully outlined in the report. There are several comments in the report that are of concern. I note that non-urgent tasks will experience delays, increasing the likelihood of failure demand. That's on page 95. If tasks are delayed, they don't go away, they just build up and put more pressure on our services. The paper on page 19 states that there are only 2 proposed changes that will impact approved service standards and or require a change in policy. But reading the paper, it feels like there are lists and lists of them, again, without risks being outlined. And for me, it's those risks on risks where one change in service will impact on another. And we've heard about that from other speakers today. Just to touch on a couple, there's a risk of delaying Care Act assessments, as well as introductions of a more localised approach to support end-of-life care to enable OT capacity. That will change lives at what is the most critical time for many people and their families. There's a risk to the delivery of the sale of commercial investments, and we know that this council is totally dependent on selling some of the family silver to balance its budget. You cannot afford for those commercial investments not to be sold. Just moving on to the decision around the Chief Finance Section 151 officer, as well as SIPFA, I think I have stood in the chamber and said quite publicly that I felt that this should remain at the top table. I am very pleased to see that will be reinstated in line with SIPFA guidance. But like Councillor Purbrick, I'm concerned about costs, and I will help with the figure that was published in the papers. The total cost of that previous role, including pension strain, was over £500,000, 522. That was all in. So my question is, and we've heard that it was published in a paper, which is quite right, but those costs from memory of the interim finance officer were not, for the interim 151, were not included in that paper. So in responding to Councillor Purbrick, I would really like to understand overall the savings in the restructure of that senior leadership team, taking everything into account. I think our public get very concerned when they read these big figures. So all in all, I think there are a huge number of risks. I feel for our staff. I've heard lots of words. Chaos actually has been mentioned on a number of occasions. I feel for them and I thank them for working through what's been a really difficult time. Many constantly and consistently go above and beyond, and just to say it is noted and thanked. So I think because of all the concerns raised, I will not be supporting this paper. And again, on record, and I've said it on numerous occasions in separate meetings, I feel so strongly that we should have looked at the services we wish to deliver and how we wish to deliver them, and we should have really shaped our services before our staff. My concern has and remains that some of our most valued staff will leave the organisation, and they may be the staff that we most need looking forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Moving on to Sue Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the, I suppose, downsides of going last, or near to the last, I guess, is that the points I was going to raise, particularly why did we make our previous chief finance officer redundant at considerable cost, only to find ourselves reinstating the post at again probable considerable cost. You know, why on earth did we do that, even though some of us said at the time it wasn't a very good idea? A lot has been said by many of my colleagues, which I support. I'm not going to name names because when you start doing that, you get into trouble because you miss someone out. But I would like to draw attention to sort of, and again, it's another planning element. We also have to produce a local plan. And apparently we are something like over 12 months behind in its production. We're meant to produce this local plan by, I believe it's April 2028, and it may well get to April 29 by the time we finally complete it. In the meantime, there is a risk we could face intervention from the Minister for Housing, the Deputy Prime Minister. Planning. We've also got the neighbourhood. We've also got 30 neighbourhood plans in the pipeline. Now, those are important to their communities because it means that once it gets made, instead of getting 15% of the CIL levy, they will get 25%. Potentially that is very valuable. And if their neighbourhood plans cannot be processed or held up, they could lose out on very valuable revenue, which they could spend in their own communities. We also rely on the extension of time. In fact, I would say that basically the extension of time keeps our planning service going. If we didn't have that, and there is a very real chance the government is going to get rid of that. So those are all concerns as well. Taking into account the red lights that have flashed for considerable time from our unions, our staff who know the services inside out from the ground up, and I have a great amount of respect for what they do for us. They do an awful lot, and I'd like to say thank you to all you guys for what you're doing and also trying to keep us on the straight and narrow as well. And also, we've got 2 red flags from the auditor related to this, statutory recommendations, which we have to make a decision on about the next paper but one. With all those red flags flying, why on earth can't we just maybe take a pause for a moment, check what we're doing and think again? Because if you don't do it now, the possibility is we might be doing it again in 12 months' time and losing yet.
Thank you, Chair. Just I won't touch on the planning points. I think Councillor Rigby wants to come back in on those because they're not relevant in terms of to the restructure proposal. Obviously, the current state of the local plan hasn't been at all impacted by the proposals that we're talking about today. Just in terms of a key point, when we talk about 550 full-time equivalents, that's the number of posts that we will be losing from the structure. We do not expect that to be 555 redundancies. We've got 630 vacant posts, many of which colleagues will be able to fill. So whilst we don't know until we run through the processes, we're hoping to be able to bring the compulsory redundancy figure down to as low as somewhere around 200. Obviously, we can't guarantee that. It's up to individuals wanting to stay with the organisation and choosing to do that. But we are committed to trying to reduce the number of compulsory redundancies, and we'll keep doing that. And just finally, to say to both Councillor Chilcott and Councillor Osborne, Chair, thank you for the thanks to all the staff, because I appreciate this has been a huge issue for lots of people, lots of uncertainty. Lots of people in the organisation aren't used to uncertainty, and therefore it's hit them very hard. And it's also been very hard for managers and colleagues who've been working on the actual proposals to pull all this together and try and make it as best we can. So thank you for recognising that.
Mike Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to emphasise that point, that nothing here is going to slow down the local plan. In fact, we've taken measures in recent months to speed it up. We've had the significant increase in housing that local authorities, or many local authorities, are being expected to deliver over the next 15 years. A big jump here in Somerset, which gives us all sorts of difficulties. I wish the government would have handled this differently, but this is where we are. And what we're trying to do now is to get to the point where by next spring we have a document, technically called a Reg 18 statement, but a document on which we can begin to rely in making our planning decisions and in defending appeals. So it's all systems go on that front. And just to come back on the neighbourhood plan issue, neighbourhood plans really, really good documents. I will remind members that I piloted the first one in Somerset through, never miss an opportunity to remind you of that. And it's worked very well for the community that I live in. I'd recommend them to all parishes that are capable of producing them. The bit of work that the council needs to do is mostly at the end of that process and is not particularly onerous. So I don't see that any of the changes proposed here today will interfere with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to let you know where we are, I have 4 more names on the list which I'm going to take, which is Hugh Davis, John Bailey, John Woodman and Dawn Johnson. After that, I'm going to move it on. So Hugh Davis, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't going to speak actually, because it's gone on and gets so political when people who put us in this position X amount of years ago are passing the parcel. So sad, so sad. Please, for those who don't know me, I'm from West Somerset, and I represent with Rosebery Woods, Willerton, Watchet, down to Stagursey. So we've got quite a coastline there. The reason I'm saying this is about touching on. Yeah. But what I wanted to touch on, please, was your climate, your rights of wage and planning. What you may not have taken out, sir, regarding all these cuts is Mother Nature. And I can tell you now, in my part of the world, Mother Nature has struck, and she's striking as we're speaking. I implore you to get down there as soon as you can and have a look at certain sites in Watchet and at Doniford, because we will be possibly overrun very shortly, which could affect not only people's lives, buildings, but most of all, property that we own, and I won't name it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. John Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. I'd start with those I'm speaking about.
Can't hear you, John. Can you speak into the microphone a bit?
Okay. Speaking on behalf of those who are advancing years, I don't include myself in those, but is it possible to have a large print size of the Wi-Fi code? And secondly, an idea head-up display when you come in on the speaking routine, as you would do if you're online. It'll allow convenience and to take place. But my question really, well, first thing I want to applaud the work that's been done. We won't know whether it's going to be positive or negative until we proof of the pudding. Can you still hear me? I'm stage right. Okay. I'd like to thank all the work that's gone in for that. My question really is in relation to the devolution that we've been talking about devolving services to parishes, towns and city councils. And it's in relation to, I refer to page 22, 45, 46, 47. I read 46 very briefly. Proposed change in highways will reduce the capacity to proactively consider highway safety issues within planning applications. And I just wonder whether there's been any thought given to actually putting some of that responsibility down to the next level of democracy in terms of bridging that gap with staff, if you like, as we are trying to do by filling potholes. And that's the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor, and thank you for the recognition of the hard work as well that's gone in. Yes is a straightforward answer. So it's not something we have worked out yet because there is an issue about, and please forgive me saying it in this way, but about professional qualification and the ability of the council to rely on advice that we receive. But absolutely part of the devolution agenda has got to be about how we work more in lockstep with local partners and local organisations who know the patch better than we ever could. So we can't just say, yes, we can do that directly because it's not tenable in the current legislative framework at this point in time. But we do have to work more, and I think that is how we'll start to develop. Those are the conversations we are having and will keep having. I don't think we got a solution on the one you've flagged right now, but definitely it's a live conversation around a number of topics with different parishes.
John Woodman.
Thank you, Chairman. In this county, we have 6,000 kilometres of highway, and we also have 6,000 kilometres of rights of way as well, let alone the thousands of bridges and structures that are on that network. It's a very important network to our county as well. It's about the enjoyment, about the appeal of our county. It's extremely important to us. And if we let that network deteriorate, it will be the devil's own job to get it back up to standard. So I think we need to consider that. And on this, have we been in consultation with people like the Local Access Forum? That's my question.
Thank you, and thank you for the question. Yes, we do recognise that, and that's why we've put some of the resource back in that we mentioned response to Councillor Hobhouse's question, sorry, that I mentioned. So this is a reduction. We have flagged this as a potential service impact that we'll need to consider. We will need to look at it when we've rolled this out and see what the impact is. I think what I would say is we've already got difficulty across the country with the length of time it takes to deal with rights of way issues. And I think what we need to look at is not just the idea of continuing to put more resource into those areas, but actually we need to change the legislative framework to actually make it easier for councils rather than harder for councils. So I know it's a conversation nationally that's already happening, but we do recognise the potential impact and hence why it's been flagged in the paper.
Thank you. Dawn Johnson.
Hi, thank you. I think every person, every councillor, every officer in this room appreciates how difficult this has been for staff and for the people that have had to spend hours working on this. It's been a lot of work, and we do all appreciate with sympathy and empathy how difficult this is to be working amongst and trying to do your day job whilst all this transition is happening. I think for the comments that people have made about people that have decided to leave, I think how people handle uncertainty is a very individual situation, and it's not a predictable situation. So some will choose to leave and some will choose to sort of sit it out and see how things can work out. That is not a predictable situation, and it's a very individual decision. I think I absolutely have concerns. I think everyone would have concerns with whatever new structure was being put in place. I think that's absolutely right that concerns are raised. I'm not sure that it could have been perfect for everybody. Everybody would have had concerns whatever structure had come forward. It's got a lot of individual takes on what people feel about this structure. So I would just like to really say that it's very well having those concerns, but I guess my question is, has anyone come forward with an alternative structure to how this situation is managed? It's not a situation anybody wanted to be in. Myself as a councillor, and I'm sure everybody else wouldn't want to be dealing with the matters we're dealing with. We want to achieve great things for our residents, and unfortunately the financial situation is not supporting that. And this is one part of that situation we find ourselves in. I am reassured by how the concerns of councillors have been listened to and some of the proposed changes that have been put into the process. I think there's a lot more work to do on ensuring that councillors are going to be involved in this as much as they can be, because we do hear and deal with the residents a lot of the time, and we support our residents a lot of the time. So we need to ensure that that is fed through to the people that are working on these matters. But yeah, my final question is really, have you had any alternative suggestions for this structure come forward to you?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the questions, Councillor. Yes, we've had lots through consultation from a whole range of people, and where we can, we've actually looked at them, evaluated them, and lots of them have been implemented. So that's hence the additional £2 million or thereabouts, which has been put back into the structure. You know, I won't dwell, but you know, where we've talked about planning, for example, that was a direct result of the comments we got back from both staff, from councillors, from parish councillors, from a number of other people. Trade unions, I believe, flagged that one as well. And you know, we've reacted to that and responded as best we can by putting additional resource in. I have to keep saying subject to the budget being approved, obviously. But within there, I think we had 1,700 feedback comments from staff as part of this process, and over 2,000 items of feedback from everyone overall. And we have gone for every single one of those and worked out what we can do about it, if anything. And where we can, we've reacted, responded, changed the proposal. I'm not aware there are any outstanding proposals since the consultation closed that would say, yes, and we could change this further in this way. But that is what might come through in May after we've seen the impact of it. If services saying, well, that doesn't work, of course, we'll have to react to that. I appreciate there will be a lot of disquiet with people when they hear me say, well, if that's not right, we'll have to change it. But of course, what we don't want is an organisation where people say, this thing I thought of a year ago, even though it's patently not working, I've got to stick with it because I thought of it. So you've had my absolute commitment. If we get better proposals that we can afford, or if things aren't working, we'll look at it again. But I would just re-emphasise this restructure does not resolve the issues that we already have in some areas where we think we need to do more, invest more, and we are working on those areas separately, but it's not part of today's proposals, which I know you know, but I just wanted to take the opportunity of saying it.
Thank you. Right, I'd now like to return to our leader, Bill Revans, if he wants to add anything before we move. Right, Thea, okay.
Thank you very much, Chair. After we read who's going first. I think it was 2019 that the idea of creating a unitary council for Somerset came back into the public domain. I mean, many of us will remember the previous attempts for this to happen. But what that means is that now for over 5 years, our staff have been living with the uncertainty of initially the possibility of a unitary council and a restructure, and then the certainty of it, but not knowing what it was going to look like. The decision that has been being made this week will allow the vast majority of that uncertainty to start to be put to bed. I think few of us who are members of the council can probably appreciate quite how deeply unsettling it must be to live with that uncertainty over your future for quite such a long time. I think only the people who've been through it can do that. So I want to say an enormous thanks to every single one of our staff who works for Somerset Council now, or who has worked for Somerset Council or any of our predecessor councils over the past 5 years. Thank you for the work you have done over that time and for putting up with that level of uncertainty. I am, as I'm sure we all are, deeply saddened that many of our valued staff have left, either through the voluntary redundancy which happened last year, or for other reasons that they have chosen to go, and I'm deeply sorry that we're going to be losing staff again. Not because we don't value their work, we do, but because, as has been referenced, we need to make the council fit within the financial envelope we have. And we need to create a stable and sustainable structure for Somerset Council. That is absolutely essential. We need to be able to deliver the priorities of our residents as agreed by this council, and we will only be able to do that to the maximum of our ability when we have a properly sustainable and stable staffing structure in place. So this is a deeply painful thing to be having to do for a lot of reasons, particularly because of the financial reasons, which means that this is a bigger change than was originally envisaged. But it is nevertheless essential that we do it for the future of this council and this county. I want to say a huge thanks to all of the staff who have worked on these proposals. I know quite how hard they've been working over the last few months in particular to get them to a position where we have a viable structure which delivers the sorts of savings that we need. And I want to say an enormous thanks to everyone who's taken part in the consultation, which has taken these proposals where they are. I was listening to the excellent contribution at the end from Councillor Johnson, asking about alternative proposals, and to some extent I wanted to say these are the alternative proposals. These are the results of taking a proposal and doing a genuinely meaningful consultation with the staff, yes, but taking on board all of the comments of council colleagues as well. You know, we've covered at length planning and the need to invest in the planning service, and that is why there is, further investment proposed in the budget that we'll be discussing in the coming weeks. And on that point, I hope, therefore, that with that extra investment in the budget, all members who have spoken so passionately about the planning service will be voting for that budget. I've listened to members talking about rights of way. I've heard members say that we should not put more resource into rights of way. I've heard members say that we should put more resource into rights of way. We can have that discussion another time about how we deal with rights of way. I've listened members tell me that we're going too quickly and that we need to stop and pause and think again. I've listened to members telling me we should have done all of this 18 months ago. I don't like being where we are. I don't mean the cricket club. Cricket club's great. I don't like being where we are. I don't like the fact that we are having to shrink our organisation more than we might want to. I would love us to have a lot more money to invest in climate change and flooding, and I'd be very happy to spend more on rights of way. But we do have to live within the financial envelope we have. We do have to create a sustainable council, and we do have to deliver for the people of Somerset. And one final point, which I wanted to come back on. Colleagues have talked about the change in the Chief Finance Officer role. I think it's really, really important that everyone understands that the role that we are putting into the structure now is not the same role as the role that we made redundant previously. This is a much more focused role dedicated purely to finance and not to the wide range of other services that the previous executive director covered. And I've always thought in the structure, regardless of where that role sits, it is important to have somebody who is focused on finance and not distracted by property or the other digital or the other areas within that, particularly in the circumstances that we face now. We need someone dedicated to that. And we've seen over the last few months how effective that can be. But I think it's really important that we realise that this is not reintroducing the same role. It is a different, much more focused role. Thank you very much. I formally move the recommendations and hand over to the leader.
Bill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Theo. I've just been going through my notes from the debate, and I think you've managed to tick nearly every single point that I wanted to raise. So I would just reiterate 2 or 3 highlights for me that we've had from what I think has been an excellent, very thoughtful debate, and I thank members for that. First of all, I would hope that every single member of this council fully appreciates the incredible hard work that all our staff and the dedication to our communities that they have, regardless of political group. And we would extend our thanks to all of them for everything that they do and continue to do for this authority under very difficult circumstances. I'd also like to reiterate the thanks to the team that has worked so incredibly hard on bringing this proposal before us, and for their willingness to listen and adapt to make sure that the changes that were being proposed took into account the consultation exercise that was there. That wasn't a rubber stamping exercise. We were genuinely having a listening council, which is exactly the culture that we wanted to have. I just want to emphasise the main reason why we are in this position. I have made the point on many occasions in this council and on various other stages and platforms and meetings that we have a broken model of local government finance, and especially around social care. We have been looking for solutions for that to happen for some considerable time. We've seen a 40% reduction in funding from central government to local government since 2009. Most recently, the loss of our rural services delivery grant in the budget. We've also seen unexpected increases on our costs, like the national insurance contribution rise. We are very much looking forward to the multi-year settlement that we were promised. We were very much looking forward to the windfall tax that would have funded a council tax freeze, and we are very much looking forward to a long-term solution to social care sooner rather than later. Those things are not in our hands here. We have the duty and responsibility to provide a stable and sustainable council for the residents of Somerset, and these proposals show a distinct way forwards, and I commend them to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill. Right, I'm now going to move this on to the vote. The recommendations listed on page 12 have been proposed and seconded. Can I have a show of hands? All those in favour, please. Who's counting? Okay, those against? Okay. Yeah. Any abstentions? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, I think. 9, is it? 9. Okay, that's carried. As now we've been in session for over 2.5 hours, I'm going to have a 10-minute comfort break, please, because Could you be back in your places in 10 minutes? Thank you. Right, can we move on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the housing revenue account, rent setting and fees and charging 25-26. And can I pass over to Federica?
Thank you, Chair. I have pleasure in bringing this forward today. This is the first of a couple of HRA papers that we will see over the different full councils meetings that we've got coming up. This one has to come early to us because we do have deadlines that we need to meet in order to, if we make the decision today to increase the rent, our tenants need to be made aware what their rent set is going to be. You will see in the papers that there is a suite of recommendations before us, and in particular our rent setting, we are proposing the increase of 2.7%. That is following the government standards of CPI plus 1%. Just a reminder to everyone, I know I say it every time I discuss the HRA, but this is across both the West and the North, and so this is a shared increase across both of those different operating models, whether that's a service by the in-house service or those within homes in Somerset or homes in Sedgemoor. You'll see there's also the fees and charges that we're setting out and the different rates that we're looking to increase across the different sectors. And also there's more information around the Lifeline subsidy on page 134 that relates to point G in recommendation 2. This has been through both scrutiny, it's been also to the Homes in Sedgemoor board, as well as our in-house tenants management committee. So if there are any questions, I'm here. We've got Chris Hall also available, and I believe Kerry's online.
Thank you, Fed. Can I move to Mandy Chilcott, who is seconding the proposal?
Thank you very much, Chair. Really pleased to second. Just to pick up, we've already heard that the Tenant Strategic Board met on the 3rd of February, and I would just like that noted in. Am I back again? Also, that the scrutiny comments will be provided. I couldn't see them in the paper, and again, I think it's really our scrutiny work is valued, and it's really important that comes back through. I also note the charges that have changed significantly, and these include energy charges. I think we all recognise that those have gone up, but I think that will impact some that are there. So I note that, and also, as we've already heard, the Somerset Lifeline contract price, and that has gone up as well slightly. So noting those, happy to second the proposals.
Okay, are there any questions? I can't see any hands, so I'll go back to Federica. Oh yes, one at the back.
I hope everybody can hear me. Yes, I've got a question actually. Mandy Chilcott just mentioned about, the cost of living, if you like, the cost of energy, etc. Two things I'd like to ask the member is the fact that I think it was 5%, 2.7%. What is that in real money? Because I don't like percentages. And also, we mustn't forget, and forgive me for being a little bit political at this stage, that you talked about Sedgemoor district, Sedgemoor, sorry, homes in Sedgemoor. We must remember that the local town council just put the rates up by 39%. So it's really giving those poor people a big burden. So two questions, if I may repeat myself. How much has it gone by in real terms of money? And what are you going to do about people's rates, if you like, when they can't pay? Thank you very much.
Federica.
I can't actually give you an exact cost because there are different amounts that are paid by each individual depending on the kind of property and accommodation that they live within. And so there isn't actually an exact amount that I can give you today, but I can see if I can follow up with a rough guidance for you. In relation to support that we give tenants, we do have support available for tenants when they face hardship. We want to have discussions with them However, I wouldn't liken it to the council tax that you've related it to, because that's to do with the town council. This is in relation to the rents that we are setting for our individuals that live within our tenanted properties. And as I've advised before, there is support available to those and we look to work with them.
Thank you. Diogo.
Yeah, just a really quick one, just for the record. One of the things I know I and other colleagues raised at different stages where we've seen this paper is the increase to electricity charges in communal and in personal areas, particularly the effect on self-funders. But we were reassured by the fact that I think Councillor Federica made, that these had been approved by each individual tenant board. So that's why we're happy to support this as well.
Thank you. Fed, do you want to say anything to sum up before we move to the vote?
No, I'm happy to propose these today. And just as an added information for both of the previous two speakers, we do know that in relation to when we do put rents up, that a lot of our tenants actually receive support through their housing benefit or universal credits. So again, it will work that hopefully that they won't be at a disadvantage from that regard.
Thank you. Mandy, do you wish to add anything before we move to the vote?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, the recommendations are detailed on page 127 of the agenda. Can I have a show of hands, please? All those in favour? Any against? Are there any abstentions? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. Right, we move on to item 6, which is the interim external auditor's annual report 23-24. Mike Hewitson, please.
Thank you, Chair and members. As Chair of the Audit Committee, my role is independent of the administration and is not political. Our external auditor, Barry Morris, is in attendance today and will be happy to answer any specific questions on the 2 statutory recommendations that he's making to Council. For those of you who aren't familiar, a statutory recommendation is the second highest level of warning that an auditor can give. Only a public interest report is more significant. In this case, we have not only 1 but 2 recommendations which are set out in the report. Is it unusual to receive a statutory recommendation? Well, it used to be, but sadly they're becoming more commonplace now. When members of the public read this report, it's really important to remember that audit is a backward-looking function. The report refers to 23-4, which was always going to be an incredibly difficult year for the council, with structural change, a financial emergency and a new finance system. Management have already made progress towards many of the issues raised, but pace, scale and management bandwidth remain key challenges across the whole organisation. The first statutory recommendation covers the council's financial sustainability, correctly identifying the unbridgeable nature of the gap for 25-6 and beyond. By 2028-29, this is forecast to hit 198.5 million. Without social care reform, there is no way that this gap can be closed in the long term through cuts alone. Council tax will have to rise sharply, as unpalatable as this will be to members of all parties and, of course, to residents. While members will need to examine their own conscience about the rate and scale of any future rise, there can be no credible plan for the future of this authority without a significant increase in the council tax base. I urge all members to have honest conversations with residents about the need and scale for any future council tax rebasing. The council is actively managing all items of expenditure through the Spend Control Board, which helped to bring a forecast overspend back into an achieved underspend. It's absolutely true that the council is relying too heavily on one-off sources of funding to bridge its short-term funding gaps. I gave the same warning to all of you 12 months ago. I think it remains as true today as it did then. I know that our interim 151 officer has been relentless in the search for recurring savings, and I thank her and our finance team for their efforts in strengthening the Our second statutory recommendation deals with the need for the council to develop the overarching transformation business case and identify the funding required to deliver transformation. Again, last year I stood here at the same moment in the budget cycle, and I told you that the audit committee would be monitoring those risks closely, and we have been. So it's been a standing item on our agenda ever since then. We've spent hours looking at specific risks here. It is understandable that the focus of the organisation has been on the restructure, but we need to move beyond this now to look at how services could be delivered more efficiently. In particular, the audit committee members have continued to be concerned over the growth in demand and costs for both adults and children's. Both directorates have transformation programmes which are being pursued with varying degrees of effectiveness. We have a statutory obligation to provide these services, but the services also have an obligation to all other citizens of Somerset to provide best value for money. I commend members to read the report, which has been already discussed at audit. We will continue to use it as the ongoing basis for our work plan, as we have done with the prior year auditor's annual report, reviewing progress and implementation of those recommendations. Let's be clear, if the council does not take significant steps, external auditors will be forced to escalate their recommendations. So we need both pace and scale to make sure that we implement these recommendations urgently. There are a variety of other key and improvement recommendations in the document, which again we will work through over the next 12 months. So I would like to say to members that there's a lot of useful information in here. Everything in there I recognise as being issues. It's stuff that we are already working towards. Although, let's be honest, the last 12 months have been hugely challenging for officers and for members alike. So I'd like to propose the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Can I move to Liz Leishman, who is seconding the proposal?
Thank you, Chair. I am to second this, but I would reserve my right to speak, please.
Thank you. Open it up now for any questions. Diogo.
Thank you, Chair. So reading this and kind of my comments today, this is a reflection, as we know, of the council in 23-24. And so the comments really relate to that period. Before that time, and even during it, members of the opposition, and I'll name one, Councillor David Fothergill, said over and over again that you need to get on with the job, stop blaming everyone else, you're moving too slow, you're not taking responsibility, because that was a lot of what we were hearing, passing the buck on to someone else. And I think the auditor's comments that we read in this paper, in essence, back what we were saying at the time. And when I read through the audit management response, I want to kind of support a speaker, David Orr's comments when he said about word salad with little explanation as to how plans and operating model will appear. That they Can you hear me? You can hear me. Right, basically I support David Orr's comments about word salad. That was that. So whilst I fully accept the recommendations made by the auditors, I'm not confident with the management response or the actions in the report. And just one example on that. At the audit committee, I queried about the target dates for the proposed actions and the need to really move at a quicker pace, because some of the report mentioned, and we'd said before, about the council moving slow on various aspects. The finance officer said that the target dates were the very last date by which something would be achieved, but they could work at pace to achieve before that target date, which to me was reassuring. But the recommendation 1 actions gives you just 16 days to complete all the actions that are recommended there. I don't think that's achievable. One of the recommendations is ensuring managers have sufficient skills to manage the financial resources. But your training action on that particular recommendation says to provide a programme of training, not to deliver a programme of training. And those two words could mean completely different things in my view. And considering there's 16 days to provide a programme of training, or maybe you are going to deliver a programme of training in 16 days to all the managers responsible, but I still don't think that's achievable. Another element on the document is the consultation and feedback element of the report. As the audit committee chair said, this did come to audit committee and there was quite a lot of robust debate and contribution, I feel. But it disappoints me when I read the only one sentence that reflects the comments made at Audit Committee is where it says Audit Committee acknowledged the findings, endorsed the management response and planned action, and confirmed they will maintain oversight. I tell you, there was a lot more debate and contributions by all Audit Committee members than what is put there in that one sentence. So I think it's not quite fair to sum that up in one sentence, what our comments were. I'm not confident with the risk score there. You've got a risk score currently of 25, and if all those actions are carried out in the timescales provided, it'll be down to 4. I'm not confident in it at all. I think the risk score is still far too low. One of the big frustrations I have when I read the management response is I think there's really a lack of humility in it. There's no explanation as to why things were not right, on how we learn the errors of that were made. There's lots of we're working hard, we're doing X, Y, Z, we continue to do this, which is fine, but I think there's a lack of humility into why and how, and then how do we learn from that as well. And just one final kind of overview comment. I don't know if members in this room have watched RuPaul's Drag Race. It's a very good series. And I want to just, for those that do know, if you don't, then please bear with me. Season 12, episode 9, a drag artist called Jada Essence Hall, very good one. In a trial, she's asked a question by the judges that she didn't have a suitable answer for, or perhaps didn't want to answer in the right way. So to distract the judges, what she said, she pointed to the corner of the room and said, "Look over there," completely trying to distract from herself. And all the judges did look over there. And it became a popular meme during that season and was used over and over by that particular drag artist for the rest of the series. I think we probably have a lot of Lib Dems who are avid fans of RuPaul's Drag Race and that particular season, because since they came into power, they've been saying, "Look over there," blaming everyone else apart from themselves. They distract and blame everyone else. And with this audit commentary, I'm afraid to say it looks exactly the same. They're looking, look over here, what we're doing today, not what we were doing in 23-24. But I will finish by just telling them we won't be distracted by their RuPaul's Drag Race learnings, because we're looking fairly and squarely directly at them. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. I feel I need to come back on this because I may be the only member in this chamber who's been in a dressing room with Danny LaRue. And I can tell you that he makes the current ones on television look like amateurs. So I do want to say, though, that we do seem to be back to this too quickly, too slowly. So we're not moving fast enough. Somebody else, I think on the same party, thinks that we should be taking a 6-month pause. I find that quite difficult to understand what the meaning is. I think we need to acknowledge that when the Secretary of State said that Somerset would go to the Unitary Council, the interest rates and inflation were down on the Somerset levels. By the time we got to vesting day, they'd been up over Dunkery Beak and Crooks Peak and everywhere else, and were just starting to tip over to the other side. We also had fallen off the cliff face of the COVID grants. So there is a really significant time in the history of local authority when the Secretary of State announced the LGR, and there is something else that I keep talking about at the Local Government Association and at the County Council network, and I still don't think anyone is acknowledging that if you have the elections before vesting, rather than the election immediately after vesting, and you get a change of administration, that you need to acknowledge, LGA, CCN, MHCLG, all of the acronyms, need to acknowledge that it's different. Because in the past, I believe that it was the other way round. And I think that that is really significant. And on a call with leaders I did covering for our leader of council the other day, there was only one other person on that call who knew that the experience was different. And I think we have a duty to all those councils who are now being rushed into LGR to tell them that they need to understand the difference. But one day, Chair, when I've got more time, I'll tell you about Ken Dodd in the dressing room as well.
Lucy Trimnell, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So what I struggled to find from the papers, and I think they were quite wordy, possibly necessarily so, but was how this gets reported back. So these are sort of two of the highest level sort of red flags that can be flown, I suppose you could say. And so obviously there are actions that you're going to put in place, but how are they assessed and what's the outcome if we don't meet those? Is there a specific outcome beyond more financial trouble? Also, I noted that one of the in statutory recommendation 1, there was the line, we needed to establish an appropriate culture of financial accountability, which suggests that we don't have one, and that the transformation programme could be putting a lot of services under a lot of stress, and our staff as well. So what I want to know is, does this council believe that they have the resources and the ability to turn this around and to answer to both of those and put us back on the correct path? So 2 questions. 1, how does this get resolved? And number 2, will we be able to?
Thank you, Mike Hewson.
So I can do question 1, Lucy. So in terms of the process from here, with the last auditor's annual report that was reported back to, I think, every audit committee, we have a dashboard showing progress against each of the what was key and improvement recommendations last year, but which will be statutory recommendations. I suppose my reflection as an audit committee chair is it's as much about the journey as it is about the destination in terms of where you're trying to get to. It's not necessarily about a specific thing that you do to tick a box. It's about making sure that we're headed in a better direction as far as the governance, the internal control environment, and the overall management of the risks that are in our purview. So it's obviously down to the external auditors to make their judgment as to whether we are headed in the right direction. And I know that the team will be starting work on the next auditor's annual report very soon. I know it seems very strange considering we've got that now. This is essentially looking backwards 11 months to where we were last year. The next one will be starting very soon, so we get much more timely opinion on where our risks lay, really. So I don't know if there's anything that Barry wants to add that I've missed on that. Sorry to drop you in it, Barry.
Barry, do you want to comment? I don't know where you are. Yeah, can I bring Alan in while we're getting him a microphone?
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to resourcing, I think it's critical to recognise that as part of this ongoing process, additional resources and resourcing of the programme will be required. When we have a situation whereby we need to deliver a significant transformation programme, we need to utilise skills and expertise across the authority, but also recognise that in some instances we will need external support in order to achieve that. And it's likely that we'll need to develop that. That's why the timescale has been set out in the way it has, in order to ensure that we have the opportunity to both develop the mechanisms to engage all services, learning the lessons from previous processes, but then equally ensure there's an appropriate mechanism to engage you as members as part of that discussion through audit committee, scrutiny and executive, to ensure that those resources are deployed in the right way to deliver a transformation programme that delivers the priorities for the council, but also recognise the financial pressures we're under. So this timescale enables all of those steps to take place and allow engagement to take place in that manner.
Right, Barry, hopefully you've got a microphone now. Could you hold it a little bit closer to you? No, that doesn't work. Can you give him another one? If anyone in the break has logged back into their EE network, can they log out again, please?
This will work.
This one works.
Okay, yes, hear me. I hope it's worth it. So as Councillor Hewitson said, we will be following up the progress on the recommendations made of this report. That work will start shortly after the beginning of April, and we will look to make sure that we have a much more timely presentation.
Okay.
Okay. I'll make it brief then. So we will follow up and we will present this to a much earlier version of the council. In terms of what the next steps are, if we need to make further recommendations, we will make further recommendations and statutory recommendations. As Councillor Hewitson intimated, we could move to a public interest report if we needed to. But again, we would look at the actions that the council is taking to see whether sufficient progress is being made, but also need to recognise that some of those actions are not necessarily within the control of the council and do depend on external support that may be coming from the government and from the department as well.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, Gwil Wren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, excellent. Right. Yes, I think as you recall, I felt that we should perhaps have debated this before the transformation, and I'll try and explain why I thought that. If you have statutory recommendations like an organisation like us, I think you're in a pretty grim situation, and I think we all realise that. I want to talk about statutory recommendation number 2, which says that the council should develop the overarching transformation business case and detailed business case for individual work streams that will deliver service transformation and contribute to delivering the council's ambitious savings targets. The funding required to deliver transformation and the new target operating model should be identified and a funding plan developed. This should be undertaken at pace in order to deliver the savings required to balance the 25-26 budget. Well, of course, if we debated this before the transformation, then officers would have had the opportunity to explain how they'd taken this forward over the last 12 months, and we might have had a clearer rationale. But I think what bothers me is the fact that this is not the end point, and this is contained within the response that the council's reviewed its flexible use of capital receipts, which will be approved at budget setting later this month or next month. In terms of the quantified use of capital receipts during 25-26 and indicative sums for 26-27 right through to 29-30. These capital receipts will be the primary source of funding for transformation purposes. So I think one of my first questions is actually how much have we got in terms of the family silver to sell off to help finance this? Because it's fairly clear that the operating model or the transformation we've been discussing today will not be the end of the matter, and we may be faced with this situation 12 months down the line. And I think, as I say, if we talked about this earlier, then we might have got a better sense of where we're going to. Reference was key. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The other one was key recommendation 5, which is the implementation of the staff. Yep. Right. Like having a loader, isn't it? The implementation of the staff reduction programme before the transformation programme has been developed presents a significant risk that reductions in staff will impact capacity, etc., etc. And I don't think we've really sort of drawn out how that is going to play out over the next 2 to 3 years. So I sit on the audit committee. I looked at these reports. I am very worried about them, particularly about the recommendations and how we go forward from here. And I sincerely hope that 12 months from now, we're not going to be in a similar situation. But I thought these points were worthwhile drawing out to the assembled company. Thank you.
Mike, do you want to make any comments?
Not specifically on Will's question there. I think he has made huge contributions to the audit committee since he's joined us. So I look forward to working with Will to make sure we deliver these recommendations at the pace that is required.
Okay, can we move on to Dave Mansell, please?
Right, thank you. It's a strong report and strong recommendations, and it's clear we do need to note them and be following the direction they take us, and to a large extent, I think we have been already. I sort of wanted to check a bit of understanding, which, to be honest, was very much along the lines of what Will has just said. So I may just ask it in a slightly different way. And noticing the first recommendation, it does include that there needs to be a transformation and savings programme formulated to address the future budget gaps, taking us up to 2029-30. And we've already been told we will still have budget gaps for the next 2 years, even after we set the budget in the coming year. So my understanding is, and perhaps just checking this, and especially as I didn't quite get a clear answer to what Will just asked, I think he was looking at this too. This is going to be included in the medium-term financial strategy plan that we get with the budget papers that we're still yet to see, but clearly will do by the end of the month. But I think that's my understanding. If anything, if I've got that wrong, do let us know. But that's clearly quite important and looking forward. So how about this one? That sounds good.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, thank you. So I think I've just concluded one point, and the other one, which was more of a question, and this is the second bullet point in the statutory recommendation, page 174. It says, ensure all planned savings are delivered, and where they are not, that mitigating savings plans are put in place. Now, I think we know that some of the planned savings are not being delivered. One in particular I'm aware of in relation to recycling centres, which was quite significant. Now then, what is going to happen if those savings are not delivered and there's...
You've gone again, Will. Close.
There, that one again.
Testing.
I think I'm here. I'm back. Right, try and conclude quickly. So can it just be confirmed who will approve those mitigating savings? Can we have that clarified, please?
Mike Hewitson.
So on the savings plan, I think we need to direct that to the 151 officer. With respect to the first point, which is about the, sorry, Councillor, can you remind me about the budget gap? Sorry. So members, given the trajectory and the fact that by, I think, 3 years' time, the budget gap will be almost £200 million against a £600 million revenue budget, we can't cut our way out of this situation. There is no saving that we can find that will allow us to eliminate that budget gap purely by cutting. I think that's incumbent on everyone to understand that. We will not find savings that are sufficient to close that gap. The statutory spend in adults and children now accounts for somewhere between 70 and 80% of our budget. The remaining 20% is essentially discretionary spend, but some of that's statutory in terms of highways and other functions. So we cannot cut our way out of this problem. We have to grow the council tax base. that is the only other way that we can bring funding into the council. So I know that's an unpalatable message both for residents and for all members, but unfortunately that's where we are.
I know the 151 officers here. I don't know whether you want to add anything, if you've got a microphone near you.
Good afternoon, members. I understand the question is around ensuring all planned savings are delivered and where they are not, mitigating savings plans put in place.
Can you hold the microphone a little bit nearer to you, please?
Can you hear me now? Okay. Have I got the right question? Just checking. Right. So if members are looking at the in-year monitoring reports, we are deliberately tracking all savings publicly with a full savings appendix so that we have that visibility on a monthly basis, not a quarterly basis publicly. There is an expectation that where services are not delivering their savings or indeed staying within their budgets, that mitigating actions or substitute savings must be provided. There are further mitigation tables within the reports to enable us to do that, that will enable all members through scrutiny committees to give challenge as well as executive. And I'm personally chairing two boards, the Children's Financial Recovery Board and the Adults Oversight Board, to ensure that we are doing this on a monthly basis and ensuring that privately we are also keeping the pressure on the areas that are forecasting overspends or that are not delivering their savings. As you know, the budget and the medium-term financial plan is predicated on all savings being delivered to time, profile and value. And we are ensuring, I will ensure that the budget that is presented through executive to council is a robust budget that will have robust savings, and I will comment on that, the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of reserves within my section 25 statement, and I'll be happy to answer questions through the budget process.
Thank you very much. Ross Henley.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Loud and clear, yes. Councillor Leishon, I'm surprised Ken Dodd ever reached the dressing room because he was renowned for his 5 or 6 hour stints where he would never get off stage about 1 o'clock. He hears people disappearing about 11 o'clock because just the break had just started. Can I say a more serious note? I'm not going to name the councillor who said it, but we know who did say it. This nonsense and this constant carping in terms of, we're not, saying things like we need to stop pointing fingers and everything. I'm sorry, but you talk about humility. Where is the humility on behalf of your entire group for your actual denial and actually forgetting or carefully forgetting the fact that you broke this council by freezing council tax for 6 whole years? Reflect upon that in terms of how much money you denied this authority when no other upper tier authority did the same. It was a politics of nonsense, and you must bring humility on that, and we deserve an apology from your group.
Right. The final name I've got on the list is Mandy Chilcott.
Thank you very much. I won't be giving an apology. I think if you looked at last year's, courtesy, please, I've given you the courtesy, please return it. If you look at last year's budget, and if you have a look at one of the appendices, it outlined who did not increase council tax. You were also in administration of this country when that started. So please, when looking at it, consider all councils, what decisions were made. And some of the figures that have been quoted on that are totally outrageous, and I have got them from the previous 151 officer. So even if that had not been done, we would still be not in a positive place. Let's make no bones about it. I've just heard today that there are no savings that we can find to close the gap from our chair of audit. Can I just have that confirmed, please? Because if that's the case, surely we are in 114 territory.
Mike.
Yeah, so Mandy, that's not quite what I said. So when I was looking at the 28-29 budget gap of £198 million, I cannot see sustainable savings that can be made to close that budget gap by cutting alone.
Thank you. I've written down verbatim what was said, so I don't think I've misrepresented.
Okay, right.
So just to move on to the paper we've got in front of us today, I thank Grant Thornton for the report. And recommendation 1 is to accept them. I think to not accept any red flag from an auditor, a respected auditor, is something that no organisation can do. They're there to protect us and give us guidance. So I absolutely accept the report. Item 2, however, is to endorse the management responses and proposed actions set out in the report. And I would request at this point, Chair, that we take the recommendations separately, because whilst I accept the report, I do not endorse the management responses. And for me, I think some of our previous speakers have outlined sort of concerns. They've covered some of the points I had in front of me, but I cannot see that 2 out of the 3 proposed management responses on the statutory recommendation number 1 are addressed within the comments. We do not have sufficient savings in place to minimise the use of reserves, and there's continued and repeated heavy resilience on one-off resources, including further spending of the savings and selling the family silver, we've heard that here today, to pay for day-to-day spend, also known as capitalisation. And not all planned savings are being delivered and mitigating savings plans are not in place. And I did hear our 151 officer talk about mitigating savings not in place. Can I just understand, as we currently stand, do we have mitigating savings plans in place to deliver 100% of the figure that's budgeted for in the savings? Because I've struggled, and we've had this conversation around the detail being in the report. So are we, as at today, in that position? If I could just ask that first.
Mike Hewitson.
So in terms of the management response, I think that really ought to come from management, Chair.
Happy.
Okay. Right, thank you. Just addressing the requirement to split. The only thing looking at the recommendation, although it's 1 and 2, there is an "and" in the middle of it, so it actually joins the 2 recommendations together. So really, although it's subtext by 2 Roman numerals, it is part of 1. So really, we should be taking it as 1. But if the consideration is we should split it, then I would go with that, but would be led. Mike, do you have any?
If it's written as 1 recommendation, unless there's a motion to separate it, I think it needs to be taken as 1 recommendation.
Okay. Do you want to come back?
Yes, I would ask actually that it's minuted to the effect that then if voting against, we are not in any way not accepting the statutory recommendations, but because of the way that it's written, but we do not endorse the management responses. They're 2 total separate elements.
Okay,
and they were
thank you,
italic 1
Mandy.
and 2. Thank you.
John Woodman.
It was only a response that I was just to say, I want to apologise for us freezing the council tax. I'm very proud. We left the money in the hands of the people of Somerset. I know you want to put the tax up and make the people of Somerset poorer and poorer and poorer, but we froze the tax to leave the money in the hands of the people of Somerset, because we represent the residents, not just the council.
Can we have 1 person speaking at a time, please? Liz, you wanted to come back?
Chair, I do want to ask you if you can bring in section 151, officer.
Yeah, I was just about to do that, and I apologise for not
Before
doing it.
that, if I may say that the letter that came to the Leader of Council from the Minister and to all the MPs in Somerset said that above cap increase in council tax was only allowed where it was proven that council tax was low, and that even after that additional increase, it would still be below the average and the near neighbours. So I think that letter acknowledges Somerset's specific situation.
Yes, thank you. Can I now go to the 151, please? And apologies for not bringing you in.
Just to respond to the question about section 114 and whether we've bridged the budget gap. The budget papers will be published shortly as part of our leading into the full council meeting on 5th of March. However, I would urge members to look at the report that I've already published in the public domain that brought together on the beginning of February in terms of the dialogue that we're already having with MHCLG and government with regard to exceptional financial support given our financial circumstance. So that gives you an indication that we haven't bridged the gap with sustainable savings, which is why we're having those conversations. It is important that in order to bridge the budget gap, that we have confirmation that government are allocating us the right to have capitalisation directive with exceptional financial support. Government already given permission for 2.5% council tax increase above the referendum threshold, and that will be decided at the full council meeting. And I would also urge members to remember that only robust items are entered into the budget so that we can ensure that when we're tracking savings during the financial year, we are tracking something that is robust. That is part of my responsibility to you as laid out in the legislation.
Thank you. Duncan, you wish to go in?
Yes, just pick up the other part of Councillor Chilcott's question, which was about are we mitigating all of the savings? We are predicting in the monitoring report, which I think you've all seen, an underspend this financial year overall. So yes, all savings are covered. Whether that's covered sustainably into the longer term or whether some of those savings, if they're generally undeliverable, need to be reversed out and replaced by other savings in future years, obviously is part of the budget conversation. But at this point in time, we are ahead on that prediction. We still have overspends that would be nice to reduce. We still have some savings that we're trying to land that we haven't quite landed as yet. But we are net forecasting an underspend for the council. So yes, all of that mitigation is in place, if not directly overall.
Thank you. I have no more names on the list. So can I go back to Mike to sum up? Oh, sorry, and then come to Liz. Sue Osborne's just come in at the last minute.
Thanks. I hope this is working. I was just going to ask a quick question of Maria. Whereabouts are we in terms of discussion for the exceptional financial support? Because when I have seen financial support letters issued to other authorities, they come with conditions. They are very much tailored to the authority meeting the request. And as I say, they do come with conditions, some of which may be more onerous than others. Presumably there's some discussion on this between yourself and MHCLG. So where are we with this, and when are we going to see this capitalisation directive materialise? Because it's quite important.
I think this is more a question for the budget, but I will allow the 151 officer to reply if she wants to.
Thank you. As I said, we're in discussion. We are working with the MHCLGs.
The microphone's gone.
So as I previously said, we are liaising with MHCLG and we are working with their timescales. These are not our timescales. If we have to work with the timescales that they're laying out for us. We have been advised that we should know by the end of February, and we should schedule our budget process accordingly so that we have the information from them. You're right, there is criteria associated with any kind of capitalisation directive, and we have criteria that had been allocated against the 2024-25 that we are working through. They also have a process where you have a review that CIPFA did for us, and that we need to ensure that we are implementing whatever has been recommended for us to be implementing. We are currently within the process. When we know, it will appear in the budget papers, and then I will be able to present to you a robust budget.
Thank you. Val, you wanted to have a...
Thank you, Chair. Can everybody hear me? Good. I've sat very quietly for most of the day, but I have to go back to 2018 because I was one of two people who were in the room. Unfortunately, the other person has had to leave, who sat at a meeting at County Hall of then leaders of the district councils, the county council, and I think Exmoor National Park, when the then leader of the county council told us that the council was very near a 114 notice, and unless we went to be a unitary council, they would have no option but to issue a 114 notice. And we know the history of that. We know what happened after that. But I sat here this afternoon hearing lots of brickbats being thrown. It's this fault, it's that fault. Let's go back to 2018 and put the blame, if that's the right word, where it actually lies, because this process was not started by this administration. It was started because the then county council was in a financial mess. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I go back to Mike Hewitson, please, just to move this on?
Thank you, Chair. So, members, I appreciate that that this isn't a welcome situation to find ourselves in with two statutory recommendations. I think what I'm trying to say to you as Chair of the Audit Committee is that we are working towards trying to improve the internal control environment and to improve the management of these issues within the council. Okay, I think progress has been made, is being made, and will be made. The question about where we were in 23-4, I think is very important. This was a transitional year for the authority as the new council came together legally for the first time, as the new council dealt with a number of huge issues. Going forward, I think we will continue to monitor these risks. We will continue to engage with any member that wishes to do so on any of these risks through Audit Committee. So everyone is welcome, and I look forward to working with members. I would like to say thank you to the auditors, the external auditors in particular, because we are very fortunate in that we have an external auditor that does give it to us straight and does help to deliver outcomes, which is what the people of Somerset want of us, to give reassurance around our financial statements, our value for money. So I would like to thank Barry and the team who have worked relentlessly hard to get us through a mountain of work this year. This report, while may be uncomfortable reading for lots of people, I think helps to point us in a better direction. So thank you to Barry, thank you to the team, and I'll hand over to Liz to second the motion.
And finally, with Liz.
Thank you very much, Chair. I also want to add my thanks to the external auditor and all those in our finance team and at Grant Thornton who've worked on this. Clearly, it's not a welcome read. It would be difficult to call it a good read, but it is extremely well written and edited, and it does give us a really good steer and a base from which we need to work. So we have already had it mentioned that we have the Corporate Peer Challenge report coming our way. We know that CIPFA did a review for MHCLG linked to our request for capitalisation directive. What we have to do now, Chair, is all work together to make sure that those three pieces of work which can help us transform this council, because my Chair of Audit is right. This is too big to try and cut your way through it. This needs proper transformation of the council. It needs proper mitigations where savings are not made. It needs a completely new way of working in places and an increased pace of working in many places. But I am looking forward to seeing the report that goes to audit that is based on the software IdeaGen that has a nice progress bar. And because we're very late with this report this year for 23-24, that is because the concentration was on finishing up the statement of accounts and getting them approved for the predecessor councils. And there were how many sets of accounts? 11 sets of accounts in 18 months. That enables us then to have an opening balance for Somerset Council that we can all stand behind. And I think at a time of local government reorganisation, that is incredibly important, and another message that we need to get through to the LGA and the CCN, that is absolutely vitally important. And I thank our previous 151 officer for his dedication to seeing that done. So I would like the recommendations to be taken in one, because they were taken in one at audit. And if I remember correctly, from the audit meeting on the 30th of January, they were approved as one set of recommendations. If it was good enough for audit, Chair, I'd say it's good enough for full council. Thank you.
I do stress question, then go.
All right, I have a question. The first year I was on this council, Somerset Council, we had a year to sort out this sort of thing. You see what I'm holding up, which is the structure of the new council. And what did the leading group do? Not a lot.
I'm afraid that's not a question. You're now making a statement. So I'll move now to the vote. Okay, as I indicated earlier, as this is a linked recommendation, we will take it as a single recommendation. So can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to item 7, which is Somerset Council Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. Bill Evans, please.
Thank you, Chair. This council has powers under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act 2000 in order to carry out covert surveillance of any residents that might be breaking the law, and we would need approval from various officers within the council and the magistrates court to be able to put that into effect. My understanding is that we've rolled over the policy from Somerset County Council. We passed it through executive, and it appears to have not got onto an agenda of full council. So please, can I apologise for that we've not brought it forwards. And I believe it's a power we very rarely if ever use, and so it's something we have to have, not something we particularly use. So I would happily propose it, and I understand Councillor Chilcott will second.
Mandy.
Thank you, Chair. Very happy to second. I understand, as you say, it's rarely used, but you know, if there is ever a circumstance, this would allow us to use it with those other hoops to go through if we need to. So it's right that we put this.
Thank you. Any questions? Yes, John.
Yeah, just a question. Is this something that's taken through Standards Committee?
Bill?
My understanding is it went through corporate and resources scrutiny and then executive and then to full council. I think that was the governance route, agreed with the monitoring officer.
Yeah, whoever's hand it is at the back that I can't see.
That's Councillor Healy from Huntsville.
Yeah, thank
Chairman, thank you. Just a quick one. Is this got to do with RIPA, of course? Is that what it's about?
Yes, it's that's what the acronym of RIPA stands for.
Yeah, thank you, because it's a very dangerous piece of equipment that's in the wrong hands, as we all know. That they can investigate an individual without their knowledge. They can actually even put devices on the vehicles to follow them. So I think it's glad to see it's coming in front of the full council, but tread lightly with this, because in the wrong hands it could be quite a dangerous thing. Thank you.
Bill.
Yeah, which is precisely why we need a policy which is strongly worded like this one is, and I think I'm correct in saying it has never been used by the predecessor councils, and I would hope that it would only be used in extremis if it were ever required.
Thank you. I can't see any further hands, so the recommendation has been put on page 296. Can I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Are there any against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. Moving on to item 8, which is the last item. Due to some sort of misunderstanding, plus perhaps we didn't put it over well enough, I've allowed the questions that were put in written from Diogo and from John. So Diogo, if you'd like to put your questions, which would be answered by the respective officers afterwards.
Thanks, Chair. Did you want me to ask question 1 and then question 2 to get a response?
Yeah, if you just go through both and then we'll get both responses.
So question 1, businesses in Bridgwater, they continue to struggle with various pressures in the area, mainly down to the impact of multiple roadworks happening at the same time. Now we know that licensing fees for cafes are going to more than double, parking charges are going up, and who knows what else may be round the corner that will add to various pressures. So at the exec committee, I raised this as well with Councillor Smith-Roberts, particularly around licensing, and she responded to say that any support would be cross-department and they would look into it. So my question is, what support is Somerset Council considering to assist businesses across Bridgwater that have experienced reduced footfall and loss of trade due to the cumulative impact of multiple roadworks occurring at the same time? That's my question one. Question two, which is to a different lead member, is around Bridgwater train station. The current road configuration prevents buses from using the designated bus stop at Bridgwater train station. Given the importance of linking bus and rail services to improve transport options, when will Somerset Council carry out the necessary works to enable buses to stop at the train station? Thank you.
Thank you. If I can ask Mike Rigby to answer.
Thank you, Chair. I think there are always concerns about the short-term effects, but we've had continuous engagement with local businesses. We've always had our ear to the ground. There's a recognition that when this work is complete, it will make the area more attractive for businesses. Not my words, but the words of the gentleman who's just asked the question. I'm pleased to say that I entirely agree with him when he quoted that a couple of years ago. The Celebration Mile project is a key part of the Bridgwater Town Deal programme that we've inherited from Sedgemoor District Council, and it was approved by the Town Deal Board, which includes a broad range of local stakeholders working with the council. The project aims to improve the attractiveness of the town centre to support trade in the longer term. The council and its contractors have sought to minimise disruption and engage with local business organisations and individual businesses in advance of and during the delivery of these schemes. For businesses affected by roadworks in connection with the Celebration Mile project, potential options including temporary business rate relief and waiving of pavement licences are currently being considered. The project contains provisions for marketing support once works have been completed to support future trade and capitalise on the improvements created by the Celebration Mile. The wider works in the highway network around Bridgwater are part of various organisations' programmes, including utility companies, private developers and the council to invest in essential infrastructure for the town. Once we became aware of the huge amount of work necessary in such a short period, we worked with those organisations on a programme of dovetailing works as best as possible. We've challenged all the contractors, which has in many cases resulted in better traffic management than was initially proposed, and we've even insisted on 24-hour working on some works to reduce the overall programme, such as the recent development-related works on the A39 Bath Road and A30 Puritan Hill. The aim of much of this investment is to regenerate and improve the economy of Bridgwater and will have long-lasting benefits to businesses once completed. Utilities have statutory rights to provide services such as new water or gas supply and can pursue roadworks without prior consultation due to safety reasons, for instance in the case of a gas leak or electricity outage. If and when this does occur, we move fast to see what mitigations we can put in place. Unfortunately, we're not able to provide compensation to businesses during the construction of this wide-ranging programme of improvements. Successive governments have taken the view that businesses should not have the right in law to any given level of passing trade, and that traders must take the risk of loss of a temporary disruption of traffic flows along with all other risks of running a business. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'm actually very aware of the issues around the bus stop at the Bridgwater railway station, and I'm keen to resolve the issue. The existing stop is on land owned by Network Rail and leased to Great Western Railway under their franchising agreement. I actually met with GWR representatives in with support of officers in the autumn to understand the options and for making improvements. Council officers have also met with representatives of Bridgwater Town Council about the matter, and we have agreed to facilitate work to develop proposals for an improvement and seek funding to support its delivery. Constructing improvements on railway property is complex due to the franchising arrangements, and further work will be needed with GWR to understand the most appropriate route for delivery once a solution is agreed.
Thank you. Right, the last question, which comes from John Hunt, should be a lot simpler. So, John,
we like being last, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
The floor is yours.
The floor is yours. Okay. Well, I did have a lovely question all written out, and thankfully and celebratingly, it doesn't need to be said, because I was going to yet again plea for the Taunton High Street car park to be saved. And it has been saved. This happened yesterday. So instead of reading out my rather dull speech, I just want to say thank you firstly to those who have been involved in saving said car park. Very much thank you to Councillor Rigby for changing his mind, or the mind of his colleagues as well. Taunton Town Council, of course, I know Tom Deacon isn't here, but thank you, Tom, if you're listening to this on replay. Without the Town Council, this would not have been possible, and I do want to state that. I did go to them after about a month or so of the campaign going on, and it was good of them to support this. I'd also like to mention Councillor Ellis, my fellow division member, who has also, in fact, she brought forward a proposal to, excuse me, to the Town Council as well, which was great. And the Creative Innovation Centre in Taunton, who put forward a very successful petition. In fact, I think they got a couple of thousand people signing that as well. Just one point I would like to make. This is from residents local to the car park. There is still, as I know we're all aware, antisocial issues at the car park, but a lot of these can be solved with simple measures which wouldn't be that expensive. So, for example, normally the upper decks are locked away at night. Unfortunately, there's a padlock missing apparently from one of the gates. I don't mean to be sarcastic, but it seems such a simple, small thing. So perhaps if that padlock could be forthcoming, that would be great. And clearly, we do need to look after it and make sure that there is less antisocial behaviour there. I have spoken to Taunton Town Council, and they have said, or they're going to look at using some of their staff to have a look at it occasionally, which is great, and whatever our council can do as well. But just to say thank you to you all, it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Mike, would you like the last word?
No.
In that case, I can thank everybody for their attendance. We've come in just under the predicted time, and have a safe journey home. Thank you.